No. Okay, so we're on to item 10. Consider whether to authorize the formal submission and processing of a general plan amendment application to allow 29 units where 4 units are currently allowed on an 86-acre hillside property on the west side of the city adjacent to Linda Vista Park with an average slope of approximately 48%, which would require general plan amendments to change the existing general plan land use designation. Application number is GPA authorization 2019-01. The applicant is Li-Shin Chen, and also lists the assessor parcel numbers. So do we have a staff report on this?
Yes, we do. Good evening, council members. Eric Sarno with the Planning Division, presenting on the item tonight for the general. Oh, sorry.
Speak in the microphone.
Closer. Speaking on the general plan amendment authorization request. So just to orient ourselves where we are in the process, this is essentially kind of a workflow of how everything works out. We're at the very beginning. We're at the general plan authorization request. Depending on how the item goes tonight, it can either be authorized or not authorized to proceed with the application. So the project description, as you read, is to subdivide 3 hillside lots into 25 residential lots, which would include 29 units. That includes 6 BMR townhomes on 2 lots. This is the properties that is part of the project. It's roughly 86.11 acres. Linda Vista Park and Deep Cliff are located to the north. There are single-family homes to the east and south, and a vacant parcel or vacant parcels to the west. So some of the general plan and some of the data from the project. So currently the general plan designation of the site is very low density. For this project to move forward, we essentially have to create a new general plan designation for this. Right now, 4 units would be allowed, with the project proposing 29 units. The height, setbacks, and all that is not defined right now with this current application. We would work through that if the application were to move forward as part of our typical review process. The floor area ratio, this is hillside, so there is a calculation that is taken into consideration. So it can be 6,500 square feet or 45% of the net lot area multiplied by the slope adjustments. Essentially, steeper the slope, the smaller the home gets. The applicant can do between 3,200 and 6,000 square foot homes with the BMR units between 1,000 and 1,100 square feet. The applicant does propose to comply with the Hillside ordinance. Lot coverage, we don't know that detail yet as part of this application package. The net fiscal impact of the project on the city's general fund, prepared by the city's consultant, is $71,000 net positive to the city's budget. Going into the general plan goals achieved in terms of site and architectural design. The architectural details are not provided at this point, so there's not much to go on there. That would be part of the future development. There is development at or near the prominent ridgeline. We do have strategies in place that is to limit development on the ridgelines and limit development on hazardous geologic areas and steep slopes. This is that area. The large area is left undeveloped, so 86% of the area is left undeveloped. That's roughly 73.69 acres. Typically, we require 90% or 77.5 acres. All development is really centered at the front of the property, adjacent to Linda Vista Park, on the driveway leading into the park. There are an unknown number of tree removals on the site, but that would be discussed or dealt with if the project was to move forward. The site does appear to have a riparian corridor, kind of from the hillside venting in. It would be on the road access into the site. We'd have to look into that to see if there's any issues with that. Stevens Creek is located to the north. The development of a riparian corridor is inconsistent with general plan goals and policies. This project would require a new hillside land use designation. We have 3 hillside land use designations currently. This project would essentially create a new one. We'd have to create a new one to accommodate this development on this site. The project would create new trail linkages that would run from east to west, which is consistent with city's goals and policies of creating a larger framework of trails. The provision of affordable housing, the city requires a 15% inclusionary requirement of all developments of 7 units or more. So if this project were to come in, typically it would have a requirement of 4 affordable homes on 4 lots. The applicant is proposing 6 affordable units on 2 lots, which would consist of triplex and townhomes. The net fiscal impacts, as I mentioned earlier, $71,000 positive annual impact. The environmental sustainability of the project, it would be required to meet LEED Silver or some equivalent. The GPA requested, so sorry about that. There are really no existing hillside designations to allow the project to get up to the 29. The best that they could do is a foothill land use designation, which is the lowest or the highest density on the hillside, which could get up to 17 units. But the application the GPA requested would be new hillside land use designation to allow 29 units by amending policy LU 12.12, which currently allows only 3 slope density designations for hillsides. Appendix A and F, which is the land use designations and the slope density, and the general plan land use map. The applicant does propose voluntary community amenities, a public open space and trail at the site, as well as 6 affordable housing units and 2 triplexes. The applicant has, for public noticing and outreach, we mailed a postcard to all postal customers in Cupertino, site signage on the subject property, posted on the city's official notice bulletin board, and posted on the city's of Cupertino's website. That was for the agenda. Other considerations, so staff time and resources, it's estimated to take 0.25 a full-time employee to process the application and to work with the applicant and consultants. The environmental impact of this project, we don't know at this point. That would be part of the process if the application is authorized, working with different consultants and the applicant to determine the best, the most adequate CEQA review. Again, so kind of summarizing, that's the application. We're here at the City Council meeting for the general plan authorization request. The options are to either authorize to apply for the general plan amendment and then go through the entitlement process, or not authorize. And if they're not authorized, they could resubmit with minor amendments in 30 days or reapply. Typically, the practice has been a year, but that's not a requirement. And that's it.
Great. So, yeah, before the council members give their opinion, I'll go straight to public comment. I have quite a few cards here. We're starting with Brooke Azat, followed by Stephen Jacobs, followed by Dr. Wagi Ishak. Welcome, Brooke. Brooke is not here. Stephen Jacobs, followed by Dr. Wagi Ishak, followed by Laureen Jacobs. Stephen Jacobs, welcome.
Thank you, Mayor Schaaf and Vice Mayor Chow and council members. I'm Steve Jacobs and have lived in Cupertino for about 40 years. I'm speaking against authorizing the rezoning of the 86-acre hillside property. We live in an age of climate change, hotter, drier seasons, and an increased risk of fire danger. In our most recent memory, we have had the Oakland Hills fires, the Camp fires, and this year the Kilcade fire in Sonoma. We are not immune in Cupertino. Over the years, we've had at least 2 hillside fires that I recall, which fortunately were contained and there was not widespread damage or any loss of life. From Wikipedia, 18 years ago, the Oakland Hills fire killed 25 people with over 1,000 houses destroyed. In addition to the winds, an important factor in the rapid spread of the fire was that it started in an area that was at an interface between developed and undeveloped land. This is similar to the land that is under consideration for rezoning. Point number 2, and this comes from Auburn University School of Forestry and Wildlife. The slope of the land has a major impact on a fire spreading and turning into a wildfire. I'm quoting from their report. Because of the local upslope winds, wildfires usually burn up the slope. The steeper the slope, the more rapidly the fire will burn upslope and with more intensity. And finally, more recently from Southern California Public Radio Forum, again, I'm quoting from them, there are, however, some places where the risk is so great that fire scientists say homes simply should not be built there, even in a state where housing shortages have reached crisis levels. With more residences sprouting on the edge of the wildlands, on steep slopes, or in deep, narrow canyons, fires become inevitable, and firefighters have a tougher and larger territory to defend. In conclusion, the location of the building sites make it unsuitable for rezoning because of the high risk of fire. I urge the council not to approve the change to the general plan or even to approve the investigation approving the changes to the general plan to allow more and denser houses on the hillside with such steep slopes. Thank you all very kindly.
Hey, thank you. Next, we have Dr. Waji Ishak, followed by Lorene Jacobs, followed by Jeff Paulson. Welcome.
Okay, thank you very much for giving me the time. I don't know if you can project this. So I have been in Cupertino for 40 years, and when I saw this, I was really stunned because this picture is just so clean and nice. It doesn't really serve justice to the way, the slopes of this area. So this is, my house is here, and I went into my house for the first time into this border here because it's a very difficult area to get to. I can't imagine that a house would be built here facing a big hill here and my hill here. So it's just, I'm an engineer and I just couldn't really justify how this house is going to be built. But if you look at the real picture, which is here, and that's the same lots, lot 9, 8, 7, 10, 11, and 12. A large number of trees will have to be removed in order for those houses to be built. Really large number of trees. So, I mean, I'm not against or for it, but my number one comment is that I was surprised that any house can be built in those areas. Number two, I have a question for you. If you approve that and let them build on a small lot for such a high slope, will you allow me to partition my property, which is R80, into 3 homes or 4 homes in the future? So I think, and many of my neighbors are asking the same question. If you are going to do it for such a slope of 48% down to 27%, will you allow other neighbors to partition their areas too? Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Next is Lorene Jacobs, followed by Jeff Paulson, followed by Ethan Thorman. Welcome, Lorene.
Hi, hello, Mayor, Chef, and Council. A long night and many important things discussed. I appreciate your patience. So I've lived in Cupertino for over 40 years, and I'm here tonight to speak actually against the proposed 29 homes on the 86 acres. And I'm also here to speak for the safety of our children, like so many other people spoke previously about the Carmen Bridge. So Cupertino has their Safe Routes to School program, which I can see from what was shared tonight has been quite successful in getting more encouraging students to get out and walk and bike to school. And also in that respect would curb the number of cars on the road and hopefully reduce traffic injuries. The Cupertino Safe Routes to Schools mission included this community safety by decreasing the number of cars on the road, which led to the city, along with all the Cupertino schools, creating maps for each school with suggested routes for biking and walking to school. On the website, saferoutes@cupertino.org, the suggested route for Regnard Elementary School, which is the elementary school that these homes would actually feed into, is along Terrace Drive, the main exit for these 29 homes that is already crowded when it pulls down, exits into Bub Road. And for this area, the local high school is Monte Vista, and the suggested route is actually, for these homes, on Linda Vista Drive, which is the proposed road into the proposed development. So according to Safe Routes website, data shows that as much as 20 to 30% of morning traffic can be generated by parents driving their children to school, and traffic-related crashes are the top cause of death and major injury for children ages 1 to 17. So I find that with the Safe Routes to School Cupertino mission to have its intent to be actually in conflict with the actual practice if the proposed 29 homes are allowed by amending the general plan. So a goal of the Safe Routes to School Cupertino is to create a safer environment for travel to and from school through bicycling and walking. As previous speakers have mentioned, Waze cuts through this area, which affects bikers, walkers, and Kennedy, the track team that goes through that neighborhood. So I would urge you not to authorize the formal submission to amend the general plan and to stop adding more traffic, which would be on limited access. There's no major roads there, it's only tertiary roads in an area which actually serves 4 local schools. So thank you.
Okay, thank you. Jeff Paulson, followed by Ethan Thurman, followed by Steve Garrity. Welcome back, Jeff.
Honorable Mayor, members of the council, I will not take time to recite my many planning credentials tonight. However, I will say that this is an unwise development for many reasons: fire, stormwater runoff, landslides, police and fire response, and traffic. And as a city council, you're going to make a decision tonight that will affect the city for hundreds of years. We're talking about hundreds of years of car exhaust, traffic, vegetation growth. So you really have to think of the long term tonight about what you're going to do. And second, when I was chair of the Planning Commission, I always asked, when you bought the property, did you know what was allowed to be built there? A lot of people didn't know that a 2-story house was allowed on their street, etc. However, this person bought the property knowing that 4 houses were allowed. So if you make a decision to continue to allow 4 houses, you're not going to be taking away any anticipated value. This is what he bought into, and this is what I think you should hold him to for the several reasons you're going to hear tonight. Thank you.
Thank you. Next is Ethan Thurman, Steve Garrity, and Neil McClintock. Welcome, Ethan.
Thank you. Unlike many of the people who have spoken to tonight, I'm only been a resident of Cupertino for about 6.5 years. I've been a flatlander until I moved to this community, and I've been shocked by what it is like to live in the hills. I live up in Regnart Canyon, and I understand as a city council the financial benefits of increasing the tax base with this development, and it's a difficult balance for you to weigh. But what I thought I'd share with you, in addition to what you've already heard about, as a homeowner, do I now be able to subdivide my property if other people get to do it, because we can now change the rules of how the hills are managed. I thought instead I would share with you what I've experienced here. 2 winters ago, we had very heavy rains, and driving down the road from where we live, a tree had fallen across the road. Now we have to figure out, do we use the emergency route, which means the gate has to be open. Fortunately, one of the other residents carries a chainsaw, and we were able to get the road open. But as we went back to our house, further up the road, another tree fell across the road. What I'm trying to communicate to you is, it isn't just the density and how you build the houses, it's how you interact with the environment when non-normal occurrences arise. The Oakland Hills fire, part of what happened was people were unable to get out of their communities because there was so much traffic, they had to leave their cars to try and escape, and some never made it because they were unable to drive because the roads were clogged. So I would just encourage you to think about what it's like to live in the mountains. If you increase the density, now you're having more people who need to get in, get out. If there's an emergency, any benefits the city got financially will be overcome by the burdens of trying to deal with the tragedies that follow. I hope you'll take that into consideration as you look at this. Thank you.
Thank you. Next is Steve Garrity, followed by Neil McClintock, followed by Peter, it looks like Friedland. I can't read the last name. Welcome, Steve.
Honorable Mayor Scharf and council members, I'm Steve Garrity, excuse me, president of Friends of Stevens Creek Trail. Friends of Stevens Creek Trail was invited to a presentation on the Canyon View project, where the owners proposed building a trail from Linda Vista Park through their property that could reach towards Fremont, Older, and Stevens Creek County Park. This could potentially compromise another segment of the Stevens Creek Trail. If it's feasible, the Friends believe this could be a positive step for the trail and add another valuable open space asset to the city and the region. The Friends support including a multi-use trail in further studies of the project. I'd also like to point out, beyond the letter we wrote that I was just recounting, that we are in discussions with Mid-Penn, Open Space District, and Stevens Creek County Park on Stevens Creek Trail alignments in their respective jurisdictions. The proposed Canyon View Trail could go a long ways towards providing linkage to these other jurisdictions. And these are part of our discussions with those entities. These same linkages were studied in the 2002 Stevens Creek Trail feasibility study that was conducted for Cupertino. Canyon View segment could go a lot towards fulfilling the dream of a Bay to the Mountain regional trail. Thank you for the opportunity to address the council.
Okay, thank you. Next is Neil McClintock, followed by Peter Friedland, followed by Rose Friedland. Welcome, Neil.
Is it really cold in here? Okay, cool. It's not just me. But also I'm wearing shorts, so. Hi, my name is Neil McClintock. I'm speaking actually in support of the item to allow for more housing units adjacent to Linda Vista. But more specifically, if this project doesn't go through, I want to start a broader conversation on how we can support more housing in general. Because if we don't support this initial first step, what does that say about our tolerance for housing in general? This, again, is the very first step. We haven't even done a full study on it. If we discover issues along the way, we can reevaluate what we think. If we kill this because of concerns, whether or not they're valid, well, I think it's important that we also start talking about potential solutions. Because ultimately, we are in a housing crisis. And it's easy for us to forget because we live in Cupertino. Many of us are property owners, but there are people who are sleeping on the streets just next door. 18% of our De Anza students are homeless. A lot of our renters are in danger of being evicted any day now if the rent gets too high. And I'm speaking from a genuine place of compassion as one of those renters. I am a lower income resident. I've rented here for 15 years. Even though I'm only 23 years old, my family has been here pretty much my whole life. And it's something I have to deal with daily. If the rent goes up, I don't live here anymore. But I'll still keep coming here because this is really important to me and because I think that we can do a lot better. Right now, we're kind of a poster child for anti-housing policies at the state level. A lot of people shame us, and now the state is stepping in. I think that we can do it ourselves, that we can initiate this dialogue. But we always frame housing in terms of the negative, why we can't build something. There are a lot of valid concerns, but often these are inconveniences. And personally, I can't think of inconveniences as important as actually housing people, because our neighbors are already here. They work at places like I used to work at, 85 Degrees on Main Street. They make minimum wage. They commute from San Jose. They clean our houses. They teach our students, but they can't afford to live here. That includes a huge portion of our teachers, actually. And I think the real question is whether or not we actually want to have them as our neighbors, because they're here during the day. And again, if this project isn't the one, well, can we actually focus on which one is the one? Because I think it's really time that we start doing that. We are a regional partner. As a suburb, it often feels like we are siloed off, that we live in our own part of the world, but ultimately our decisions work in tandem with everyone else's. The decisions we make here affect those in Oakland, because if we don't build housing in Cupertino, well, they have to build a lot more in Oakland to offset the regional problem. And if that happens, those who are lower income, largely Black and Latino, are in danger of being displaced. That is happening right now, actually. And here we have way less of a danger of displacing folks if we build. And I think it is a moral responsibility. So again, I'm not too focused on this specific project. I don't live up there. I live on Atherwood and Miller. I don't know what the hills are like, but I'm not a developer shill. I'm just someone who really cares and thinks that we have a problem. So I hope that you consider that in this analysis you're doing, in this vote that you're doing, but also just moving forward. We should come to the table and we should find a viable solution, and we should do that sooner rather than later. Thank you.
Okay. Next we have Peter Friedland, followed by Rose Friedland, followed by Jim Moore. Welcome, Peter.
Would it be okay if we're going to swap?
Oh, fine. Okay.
Help with narrative. So, good evening, City Council, and thank you for the opportunity to address you on the issue. I'm going to briefly use my time to give voice to my concerns, but not to reiterate what many other people have said. I recognize that your wisdom derives from our collected wisdom, and I appreciate your attention and care on this issue. I do live on Lindy and am familiar with the steep hillsides and the canyon and that location. I worry about the fire danger, as has been mentioned. I worry about unstable hillsides and the disruption to the old and unremediated quarry. I worry about damage to the riparian corridor, as the planning department has commented on in staff report, affecting watershed, green space, animal life, and coincidentally acting counter to former Mayor Lowenthal's point earlier this evening about the priority Cupertino residents place on walkable trails and access to open space. Regarding the economic analysis, which I did read actually, it appears a straight analysis of the increase in finances to the city based on taxation, property taxes, sales taxes, and then an analysis of the requirement for city services based on the population increase. But it assumes a zero-sum game, that there aren't going to be any additional costs to city services. But I would be concerned that based on the type of development here, the hillside, the fire danger, and other issues, including landslides and increasing rain in future years, that's not really a comprehensive analysis. There may indeed be additional costs that the city could incur in a development such as this. On the housing, as was just stated, I agree that Cupertino needs affordable housing. This development is mostly prestige homes. The BMR units are really a small component. And I agree and endorse the former speaker's request for a wider conversation about housing. On trails and trail linkages, again, I'm in favor. The area designated in this proposal, however, for the trail is not an optimal course and is exceedingly steep. The devil's in the details. These combined parcels, the 86 acres, have apparently changed hands in private sales over the past few years. Some participants in these transactions and consultants to them have been former elected officials of the city, as I understand. The land is ideal as an acquisition to expand existing parks, and it's a public shame that this option has not been provided with an opportunity for consideration due to the private sales. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, Peter Friedland. That Peter's followed by Jim Moore, and Jim's followed by Govind. Welcome, Peter.
Thank you. Well, not former mayors, but two former commission chairs. So I've had some, this is one of the first times I've been at this podium when I didn't lead police protection because I was helping the city council with information about cell phone towers. So just to add a couple details to what's already been said. I don't want to repeat the basic arguments, but to try to put an actual face on some of the issues. From our house on the top of Lindy Lane, without traffic, it takes about 7 to 8 minutes to get to Stevens Creek Boulevard. Already, when there is school traffic, by any route possible, it takes close to a half hour to make the same travel. So any increase in traffic, besides the safety problem, is also a tremendous inconvenience to everybody who lives up in that area. Secondly, on the fire damage, in July of 2006, there actually was a significant fire right in that area. We had planes flying directly over our house that were about to hit our roof, dumping repellent, dumping water in that area. Luckily, we and our neighbors had made sure on that hill there was a very large fire break, debris had all been cleared and stuff, and the notion, I really, we'd be somewhat scared if another fire started in that area, and now you had 29 areas of tinder to burn up, advancing up the hillside towards our home. I will say that when we bought our house in 2005, we looked carefully into the zoning areas. We have a little over 3 acres, but the request to build more houses never entered into our considerations because we respected the way the city had zoned the property and wanted to keep the land as natural as possible. So I think I won't even go into seemingly selfish issues of view. It certainly would harm the view, but there's one other thing to take in consideration. For building this many units, it would probably take on the order of at least one, more likely probably 2 to 3 years to do all the building. That presents a considerable noise issue, not just to those up the hill, but also to all of the neighboring schools. It's in an area where we already hear and appreciate the marching bands and the like during football games on Friday night. But the notion of there being continuous building noise over that long a period affecting all the students in those schools that are well within hearing range would bother me also. The final thing I will state, which some other people may state more accurately, is that it did point out some potential flaws in the noticing process, by the way. We and many of our neighbors never got that mailing about the city council meeting. We also want to point out that the signage noticing the property is almost invisible to almost anybody where it's located. Other people may point out where it actually is located, and we've already talked to the city manager about improving these processes, and we think she'll probably do the right thing about that, but that was another flaw in this whole process. Thank you.
Can we ask the city manager to answer the question about the postcards and the signage?
Yes. I have a copy of the form that I discussed with the neighborhood group about the mailing of the postcards. And while they guarantee a mailing of 23,178 cards to the households citywide, many times they're short, we're told. So I've decided that instead of going standard mail, which basically does not put an address on the cards, it just has the cards produced, we're going to put first class mail so that each and every postcard has an address. Still doesn't guarantee that everybody sees the card, but it guarantees there's one for each household that gets mailed or gets carried there.
I understand you mentioned this time it was mailed bulk mail.
Standard mail, basically what's...
No, it's not bulk mail.
What's this time?
They give 23,000 cards to the post office, and the carrier delivers one to each house. There's no address on the card.
Right.
There's also bulk rate mail, there's first class mail, and next time we should do first class.
Yep.
Wait, so we gave both post office 23,000 pieces of mail, and this is supposed to cover every household.
It is supposed to cover every
But
household.
somehow they come up short because we have more than 23,000.
We don't know exactly what happens because it's not our process, right? So that's why we think that changing it to first class will fix
ensure
this
we
problem.
have to put address on each of them.
Right, yeah, it will, and it will cost more, the applicant will.
Is that first
charged.
class, or is that just, I mean, you can get a bulk rate if you pre-sorted and all that.
Right, there's-
But
yeah,
you have
yeah.
a,
But the cheapest one, and the post office even tells you save,
Yeah, right.
$18,000 by doing this, is no address. It's just like the supermarket ads, they just
yeah, what we
deliver them to
want is
everybody.
probably the most efficiently delivered with a unique, an address for
Yeah.
every household, right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
How
Whatever that looks
costly is that? Or maybe we could just put address in the, maybe within 1.5 mile of the property?
Well, I would
How costly
appreciate-
is it to do it citywide?
I would appreciate the ability to fix the process, both the mailings, the notifications, the process itself. And I think I fully understand where the issues hit, given the conversation with the neighborhood. So I think it might be more productive to have a conversation about the development itself, rather than the noticing and all that stuff, because I'm fully aware of what needs to happen.
Okay, so who will be paying for the postage? Would that be covered by?
applicant.
Property owner,
Property owner?
as usual.
Yeah.
Okay. And the signage? You mentioned that it has
the
to be
property
put
owner
on the
paid-
property, so
Yeah, it
that's
has to
why
be put on private property,
it's
not-
not visible,
Correct.
right? So is it possible, like in this case, the entrance is city property. In the future, is it possible for us to just add a sign on city property where it's more visible, or right of way?
I would have to confer with staff on that. We don't typically put anything in right-of-way, and certainly the property owner cannot notice on someone else's private property.
Yeah, I know.
So it's fairly restrictive, and it's a tough spot right there. So I'll have to get back to you on that one. But I really do think that I have a good idea of what needs to change.
Okay, next we have Jim Moore, followed by Govind, followed by Connie Cunningham. Welcome, Jim.
Good evening. I'm Jim Moore. I've lived here since 1976. The other thing that you may have noticed is some of us are shivering. I'm one of them. It'd be good if we had some heat here. One of the things I'd like to share first is not my top concern, but I've been hearing things about how affordable these homes are going to be. And this happens to be from the fiscal analysis that was just done mid-October. $4 million single-family homes, 23 of those, $840,000 each for the below market rate. Those are at least the top ones out of my range. I probably could afford the below market rate. I wanted to get to my top concern, though, which is the fact that this street access, and it's the only street access, empties into Linda Vista Park. That's going to create a very unsafe and dangerous situation there, especially being that road is about, well, not quite a quarter mile long at a 14% grade. If you put a bowling ball at the top of that hill, it'll be going over 60 miles an hour when it gets to the bottom. No power or whatever, just rolling. So pretty dangerous when you have cars going down there. They're going to make that turn, whatever you put there. You put a stop sign, they're not going to go ahead and stop. You're going to affect the visitors to that park, and I visit that park about twice a week, and I've done it for almost 40 years. There's hundreds of visitors each day to that park, some of them mothers with strollers, kids, not just people like myself walking a dog. So it's very dangerous. And this kind of gives you an idea of that street that goes down and empties into Linda Vista Park. It's a good slope. It's twice the slope of Lindy Lane, which is where I live. And a lot of people don't come up to Lindy Lane because it's not something that they want to deal with each day. If you had a bus at the bottom, you'd probably be able to get people to ride the bus up to their homes, but walking up a 14% grade is not something you're going to do unless you're younger. The other thing I wanted to continue is what I talked about earlier as far as the grade. Lindy Lane is 7%, this hill road is 14%. The slope of the hillsides is 27%. And again, you've heard this as far as the property, it's 48%. That's a little bit more than I can go ahead and walk up. But like I say, the homes are not really working-class people unless you're making enough to buy a $4 million home. Thank you.
Can I ask you a question, Jim? Okay, so I understand the concern are the slopes. However, for example, there are homes like in Saratoga that's in the entire hilly area, very winding road, and there are homes built in that kind of slope. And it's common in Lake Tahoe, in Saratoga. So, and then in San Francisco, there are hills that's huge.
There
So
are
it's
hills all over.
feasible,
Okay.
right? So what exactly is the concern? Because yeah, when it's built in a mountainous area, there will be slope. And there are areas that you'll have to drive up.
Okay, if I can answer?
Yeah.
Okay, a couple of things. If you look at the maps, you'll notice that for most of the homes, sites, there's really not a flat spot. So what they're going to have to do is grade, and once you grade on those hillsides, you're going to have to put in some pretty massive retaining walls. And the other thing, having lived the next canyon over in a hilly area, our hills don't move as much as the ones around Linda Vista Park. We move about 1/4 of an inch a year on our hills, the ones by Lindy Lane. The ones that are near Linda Vista Park, and you can talk to some of the public works people that are actually maintaining the park, have a much greater difficulty maintaining those hills than we have over on our side. We've lost private roads, we've lost driveways. It just happens when you live in the hills. And as far as San Francisco, I don't remember San Francisco hills sliding, at least I don't read about it in the paper.
So you mean you lost load because of the slope?
What's that?
You mean that you have lost the road because it's sliding away, it cracks?
We have homes above us that have lost their driveway. It's taken them weeks to get them cleared. We had a private road at the very top up where Rose lives that lost the road, and they had to build a bridge along the cliff in order to go ahead and have that route open. The house 7 homes down from us in the mid-'80s got wiped out by the hill.
So potential
It's dangerous.
environment. So a potential environmental concern landslide for that area. You mean? But then, in terms of hills, I have to say I've been to someone's house. Their entire property is on a slope. The house is built at the level at the road, and there are homes that's built like that.
Yes, absolutely.
And they have been there for many years.
Okay, thank you.
Okay.
And I would point out, there have been instances in San Francisco of the home sliding down the hill as well. So it's not an issue unique to any one city. Next, we have Govind, followed by Connie Cunningham, followed by Carol Gorska. Welcome, Govind.
Yeah, no, first of all, thank you for giving me this opportunity.
Speak to the microphone, please.
Yeah, thank you for giving me this opportunity. Hello, Mayor and City Council and City Manager and Planning, and also our City Attorney and City Clerk. So I have about 6 points here. I'll try to see how to rush through them. First of all, I just feel that this particular agenda item should not have happened as of today. It should have been in the November cycle. So I wanted to point out that a thing which happened in terms of GPA process, and there were 3 points pointed out there. That is, they wanted transparency, early input, as well as voluntary community amenities. So this was something which was done by the planning staff, and I would request that planning adheres to whatever they themselves have provided as a process, and not bring up things out of cycle. If something gets completed for first cycle, let it go for first cycle. Otherwise, wait for the next cycle. That was first point. Then second is that I was introduced to this particular project by somebody who's a close friend of the person who has bought this property. So whatever I say is a lot of deep respect, because I do not want a relationship with another resident of Cupertino to be soured for reasons which are totally not related to what we are trying to say. the thing is that the GPA, the issues with the GPA here is more to do with taking a site which is for 4 homes and expanding it to 29 homes. So we have an issue typically of something called regulatory arbitrage, and I believe that the city needs to be a little careful because this is something which is going to come up again, and unless the property is really suitable for housing development, I think city needs to be very careful with regulatory arbitrage, which is going to make the property 10x whatever is the property was bought for. So I think this is something city needs to pay attention to. Then typically we need more time for public input. In this case it was little restricted. Many people were not even notified. And the other thing with this is that the particular, the nature of the property is such that I think, all the issues have already been pointed out by people who live in that side of Cupertino, so I cannot add any more extra points to that. I just feel that it's probably not the right place to build, and if the city gets involved, it's going to be a risky proposition for the city as well. Thank you very much.
Okay, next is Connie Cunningham, followed by Carol Gorska, followed by Linda Ruthruff. Welcome, Connie. And we did get your printout.
Oh, okay,
as
great.
well as the email.
Thanks. Good evening, Mayor, Vice Mayor, council members, and staff, city manager. My very first reaction when I first saw this GPA announcement, because it didn't come on the, I did get the postcard, but prior to that, I just saw it as a little one-liner on things that are being done at the city level, and I went, oh, I hadn't seen that before. My very first reaction to it was, this is a mere 10 miles from Lehigh Quarry, a major polluter in our region, toxic wastewater, air quality. Cupertino's been fighting this Lehigh for years, and they plan to open a second quarry. We have been objecting to trucks and et cetera, all near Cupertino housing. So my first question that came to my mind was, why do we want to build more homes close to Lehigh? As you all know, since I'm on the Housing Commission, speaking separately tonight, I support affordable housing. So I am disposed to accept some downsides to the general plan, more than many people would accept, because I'm very much in favor of getting more housing in our city for people who cannot afford $840,000 even. However, my second reaction was they plan to build on the ridge lines of our hills. Not only does this take away open space, wildlife habitat, and view, it increases chance of disastrous wildfires, such as those in Sonoma County, and some of the previous speakers spoke very eloquently to that effect. Affordable housing does need to be part of development, but only smart development. Neil McClintock made a good point about having a further discussion about, if not here, then where, and I think that's a valid point. More than valid. It's a critical point. We need to find the answer to that within our city, but I don't think it is this particular piece of property. Thank you.
Hey, thank you, Connie. Next is Carol Gorska, followed by Linda Ruthruff, followed by Ishin Pan. And after this, we will have the applicant present they get 10 minutes to present their plans. Welcome, Carol.
Hi, Carol Gorska here again. Good evening, everyone. I just wanted to read a couple of excerpts from letters that other citizens sent to emphasize what they have to say. One of them is that it's not just 29 homes possible, but because of the mandated entitlements afforded by the state of California through Assembly Bill 68 and Senate Bill 330, Cupertino could expect to see 12 housing units without a general plan amendment and up to 75 housing units with a general plan amendment. So that's something to be considered, and we don't have any, the city can't do anything about that. That's a state law taking away our local control. The other thing is that I'm very concerned about the process not being followed, and I'm not just talking about the noticing process, but that this application was not turned in complete on time, and yet we're considering it. And I sound like I'm being too detail-oriented and a stickler, but the truth is, if you don't follow the process that you wrote fairly across the board, then it's not fair to all developers who come forward, and I wish you would stick to the process. Thank you.
Hey, thank you, Carol.
Sorry, can you clarify why does that, Carol, can you clarify why would it build up to 12 units without GPA?
Because you can allow 3 ADUs on each one.
No, 2 ADUs.
2 ADUs,
So that's
right.
12, right?
I believe one detached, one attached,
No,
and
no,
then
no.
the original
No,
house,
you could
is
have
it?
2 detached.
Just
So you
2
get 3 per
Oh,
property.
so each property gets
Right,
to have
yeah,
2
multiply
ADUs
everything
now.
by 3, exactly.
So, okay.
Okay, Linda Ruthroth, followed by Ishin Pan, followed by Bob McGibbon. Welcome, Linda.
Thank you. Good evening. My name is Linda Ruthruff. I am the Volunteer Conservation Chair for the local chapter of the California Native Plant Society. I am here to speak on behalf of our 1,000 members. The news has not been good. Science Magazine reports that since 1970, North America has lost more than 2.9 billion birds. In less than 1/2 century, the avian population has declined by some 29%. That's more than 1 out of 4 birds gone. The New York Times proclaims the insect apocalypse is here. Insect populations worldwide are crashing, and everything higher up on the food chain will feel the impacts. Why is this happening? Massive loss of habitat due to development and urbanization, widespread use of insecticides, fragmentation of habitat, invasive species, landscapes that are designed with non-native plants, and of course, climate change. All these losses are attributable to the summation of the results of billions of individual decisions. Each decision seems so small in its impact. How could 25 extra homes on a hillside matter? But the accumulation of all of these decisions has had devastating worldwide impacts. It is time for all of us individually and collectively to start taking responsibility for the cumulative impacts of our choices in relation to the fate of our natural world. The remaining open spaces and hillsides and creek corridors are the last havens for wildlife in our cities. Please, each of you tonight, make a decision. Please leave a legacy of holding the line against further destruction of critical habitat in Cupertino. Thank you.
Hey, thank you. We have Ishin Pan, followed by Bob McGibbon, followed by Jean Bedord. Welcome, Ishin.
Good evening, honorable council members. I've been a resident of Cupertino for over 4 years. I'm here to support this Canyon View project. We live in Franchise Street, which is very close to Terrace Drive and very close to the Linda Vista Park. My parents actually go to Linda Vista Park every day, and they are it's a popular park and with a lot of senior citizens hanging out there. I think with a new chair, it would open up the connection to the open space on up here, which would be very beneficial to local residents. Secondly, I think we do need more housing in Cupertino, and for this project is a very low density, 29 units on 86 acres of lands. So that sounds very density to me. I think it's first step. I think anything is better. It's this area is highly sought after residence area, and we do have Apple campus nearby and all. So I think we do need to build more houses here. Now, the last point on the traffic, I do drive on Tech Rainbow every day. I noticed the traffic is dominated by the school traffic. So if you build 25 more units, say it's like a drop in the bucket. It's not really the local residents. The traffic is more like Kennedy and Mount Vista High School parents dropping their kids. So I think that the impact on traffic will be negligible. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Next, we have Bob McGibbon, followed by Jean Bedord, followed by Susan Chen. Welcome, Bob.
Thank you very much. It's been a long time since I've been back here. I've hiked this area extensively up there, Mid-Peninsula, Fremont Older, that whole area, so I'm very familiar with the area. I visited the site about a week and a half ago, so I'm familiar with the site itself. One thing I have concerns about is the financial impact on the city itself. Palo Alto found out back in the 70s that it's a lot cheaper to buy the land and keep it as open space than to have housing up there. And what they have now is Foothill City Park because of that concern and the financial ramifications. Another concern I have is, Liang, you mentioned building up there. Yeah, you can build on the hillsides. It is zoned for basically 4 sites right now over an 86-acre parcel area. It's not really conducive to building what they have proposed here on 10 acres and up to about 75 housing sites up there. Some of my concerns are the proposal itself is requesting a general plan change to allow upwards of, again, 75 units roughly on 10 of the 86 acres, which is presently zoned for a maximum of 4 plus 8 house sites on all of the 86 acres. Presently, there is no city hillside general plan land use designation that even allows this type of dense development. A new one would have to be created just to cover this type of development. Presently, General Plan LU 12.1.1 section states the city will limit development on ridge lines, hazardous geological areas, and steep slopes. Most of the proposed development is along prominent ridge lines and in fault rupture slope instability zones. General Plan Policy ES-7.8 states requires retention and restoration of riparian corridors. The main street and 7 of the proposed house sites basically will destroy the major riparian corridor on this property. And you can look at the map and see that. There are many more defects associated with this, and one of them is the idea about the trails. I've built many trails for Mid-Peninsula Regional Open Space District and also the state park system as a park ranger. I'm familiar with trail design and so forth. What's being proposed here is a horrendous element in regards to having a trail go up there along those slopes. 14% is just outrageous, and when you get to the other side, where you have that ziggly line coming down, they probably didn't even look at it, but you know, that is not the types of trails that a public agency would even consider building. I think it was put there mainly as a carrot to basically try to get this project through. There's plans for a trail from Skyline to the sea along this corridor area. Not Skyline to the sea, basically Skyline to the bay. And this would not be conducive as part of that trail system. I mean, parts of this will be maybe single track at the very best.
Thank you. Yeah, you're out of time.
I'm out of time. Okay, thank you for your attention.
Okay.
Answer any questions you have.
Can I ask a question about the trail? Sorry.
Sure.
So assuming that this property we We just want to use it to build a trail. How would you design it? You say that the current design, it's not feasible.
Well, trails are generally designed with a 5% slope maximum in the feasibility. Just along the roadside itself, you're talking about at least 14 to 15 degree slope.
So you would do switchbacks if you were doing.
And then when you get to the switchbacks too, if you've been out there, I don't believe any of the council members have probably walked the property. It basically goes down, again, this is an old quarry site. It goes down the face of the quarry. And
I guess that's a pretty big property, right? Is there a way a trails possible going through the side of the property, the edge of the property, and that doesn't have to go down to the quarry site, right?
there probably is, but again, if you basically allow them to move forward with this development, they're basically telling you where they want to put the trail, which is the most horrendous area to put a trail through.
So if we prioritize trail design, let's say, and we identify where the trail will be, that's the best location, and then they might develop home sites around that. Do you think that it will still be possible to identify a trail that's feasible to make that connection?
Yeah, I think that area, again, you have 86 acres there that you can work with, and this feasibility to put a decent trail through that area, but not what they're proposing. Again, their proposal with the road is basically destroying our riparian corridor in there with the main road itself and 7 of the housing sites.
So you mean the Stevens Creek Stevens Creek Trail feasibility study identified a certain trail through that property?
I believe it does, but also
but then this plan did not follow that.
Right. There's also, I think in 2014-15, there was a financial feasibility study, and it quoted, and Peggy Griffin has more information on this, but it would cost several $1 million just to consider putting a trail in that area.
Okay.
Okay, thank you.
Jean Bedord, followed by
Thank you.
Susan Chen, followed by Shawnee Kleinhaus. Welcome, Jean.
Good evening, Council. Well, it looks like it's going to be another late night. My name is Jean Bedord, and I do live in Cupertino, close to the Linda Vista Park. And I'm one of the people who got the postcard. And in fact, someone came around and put flyer on my front door sometime late this afternoon. Well, I'm in the minority here because I think that you should move ahead with considering this. I think it's important to realize that the zoning for this property was set decades ago, and the purpose was to protect the hillsides. Fast forward, as a community, we need to look at housing. This is a total of 86 acres within the city limits. Currently, they could go ahead and build 4 houses there. But this proposal allows for 29 homes. Currently, the area is inaccessible to the public. So there's no real public benefit at the moment. So yes, there are a lot of questions about the impact of the project, but those will not be answered until you move to the next stage and get it fleshed out more. Now, perhaps this isn't the right project for this property, but I don't think that you should stop the process right now. I think you need to move ahead because there are community needs that need to be addressed, and you need to continue the conversation. Thank you.
Okay, next is Susan Chen, followed by Shawnee Kleinhaus, followed by Gary Newman. Welcome, Susan.
Good evening, City Council members. I'm Susan Chen, a longtime Cupertino resident and the architect of this project. So I'd like to speak a little bit more on the technique points. First, I want to say this time rezoning is from not big changes. It's from very low density to low density, still under the residential development. And also we reserve, everyone talking about the reserve natural conditions, but it doesn't mean now should be stop any development. Some development can provide, can improve our society and move the society, move forward. Like we build a road, we build a reservoir. So we cannot say any development is not good for natural. And also we have so many successful samples on the hillside construction, such as Los Altos Hills, Saratoga Hills, Hillsborough. So we did so many successful projects in that area, hillside area. I heard many people worry about the fire and the safety. Currently, the property is not safe for public. I find that many people broken the boundary into the hill, try to have a hiking or somehow. It's very dangerous. And also, if something happens, the fire can happen everywhere. If it's happened on the hillside, how the fire engine accessible to the side? So we have to have some road to let the fire engine come into the top of the hill to help to stop the fire. And also people worry about the traffic, but from our experience, from basic traffic study, 29 units generate traffic problem is very minor to impact our current Monte Vista traffic condition. Have to know it's very minor impact. The people always worry about the slope. I understand it's pretty steep, 48%. But have to understand it's average slope. It's not mean everywhere. So the project, we designed the winding road. We try to reduce the slope. And also some lot sites, we pick the pretty flat area. And also through the very minor grading, we can achieve the successful building height. And for the slope, and then for the geological conditions, I knew it's somewhere maybe dangerous, but under today's technique, engineer method, we can do everything is possible. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Next is Sherry Kleinhaus, followed by Gary Newman, followed by Lisa Warren, and that's the last card is Lisa Warren. Welcome, Shani. Did I pronounce your name right?
You can pronounce it that way.
What's the right way?
Shani.
Shani, okay, sorry.
Thank you. Shani Kleinhaus with Santa Clara Valley Audubon Society. This project is one in a series that we've been fighting probably 30 years due to the tremendous potential impact to wildlife in the area. Unlike other projects that I spoke about and expressed some concern, this one really is critical. This should not happen. This project should be rejected on a multitude of reasons. Wildlife is one of them, and your constituency loves the wildlife. We know that. We have a lot of people who come to our programs in McClellan Ranch. But also the wildfires. I just went to, last week, I was at Paradise, and I saw what happened there, and it scared the hell out of me because you can see what happened at the rims, and this is just like that. It looks so much similar, and I've been there. So I walked that area, I know it. I think there's a concern that were expressed, you're right. Other cities are looking at their boundaries and preventing growth there. And they're using different tools, and I would advise that you can look at those tools like transferable development rights and other ways to reward landowners and not let them build, but let them use their rights somewhere else, downtown, or in a way that actually provides housing and provides what the city wants. I know that many of you prefer to see the trail connection, but in this case, it's the damage that this would cause to the environment and the potential risks to your population is more important than the trail. Find a way through maybe transferable development rights or some other tools, and don't decide tonight to change something that will haunt this city for generations. Other people have said that. This is not just this property. If you change the general plan, that has huge impacts on a lot of other properties as well. Some people said here, hey, can I subdivide my property? They already have some rights from the state to develop additional units, but this paves the way, literally paves the way on a very, very slippery slope, and literally so, that should not be built. Let that say no tonight, please. And I speak for Audubon, but the other groups that sent you the letter would implore you to do the same. Leave this tonight. Explore other ways to help the city, the landowners, potentially get some trails through in a way that's actually good, and prevent the infringement, further infringement and sprawl. One of the things I mentioned in the letter is that when you build something these days, you have to have 100 feet of clear area around it and the roads. So it's not just the footprint of the house that is going to be cleared of trees, it's 100 feet around it and 100 feet from the roads. It's tremendous impact to the environment. Thank you.
Thank you. Gary Newman, followed by...
Can I ask a question of the speaker?
Sure, of course.
So let's say the houses weren't being built. Is there an alignment that you could support that would get us from Linda Vista Park to Stevens Canyon County Park, or not?
It's not easy, and it will have to be built in a very sensitive way. So how you build it, you may have to put it on a platform so the little critters have to get through, like newts and things can go under. In some areas, you may need to have a kind of blind, so animals don't see a lot of human traffic. I don't think it's impossible to build a trail there, but you have to be extremely gentle and sensitive in how it's done, and it's probably going to be expensive. I can see the agencies being interested in that, but I would advocate with them not, to sell their soul for a trail, like give away the rights to develop on the hill for the trail. So yeah, I can see that it's possible to do a trail.
I get that fundamental point. Is your issue the housing development, or is it the trail that would go up a very steep hillside and have to come back?
My issue is the housing. The trail is not, our people like to be able to go places and see birds, right? So they would use a trail if it was there, but they're mostly older, so I don't know if they'll be able to zigzag. And I don't know if there's I'm not a trail advocate. I don't know enough. I just know that there are ways to do that, but a trail through that area will have to have its own EIR because it is such a sensitive area. There's so many endangered species there. All the red-legged frogs, the other species that are remaining in those ponds that were created at the quarry sites. This area is rich and unique and special. When I look at other cities, like San Jose, I sent you the memo, they're buying Coyote Valley because they know how precious it is. I think this area is even more precious, and allowing its development the way that this is proposed is not environmentally sensitive and should not happen. And I also think it's one of those things that really allows a lot more development other than this, because you're changing the general plan. That's a huge thing. I didn't find out about it until Saturday when somebody called me. I called my colleagues, and quickly we put something together to say, wait a minute, what's happening?
Thank you. I appreciate your answering that question.
Okay.
Sorry, can I ask Shani?
It's okay, I answered Shani and any other variation.
So, I agree that we don't want to have more sprawl into the natural environment. However, this site is, I don't know who zoned it. So I printed up the zoning map. The whole area is all already zoned residential, so it's not zoned open space. There are many people who are saying we want to keep open space, but somehow we did not zone it open space. I wish we had. And so now it's zoned, And according to the staff report, the city says we want to preserve Hillside, but then we might allow about 10% of this property to be developed. That's 86 acres. So maybe about like 8.6 acres on the edge that's closer to Linda Vista Park that might be developed. But then the rest, I'm thinking can we rezone the rest to just public parkland and keep 8.6 acres? Would that be, you think it would the impact on the wildlife would be limited?
I think there's a lot of things that you brought up in what you just asked. One is, yes, it will have an impact, and the fire risk is tremendous. But the other answer to what you said, previously, the landowner, when they tried to develop another property, Parkside Trails, offered to provide this land to Post and to Mid-Penn and to county parks. And they all said no thank you because of the risks that are involved in developing that park for people's access, and they didn't want to take that responsibility because it came up with a huge cost. So at the time, even though the idea was, well, we'll build a trail, we'll let us build, I think it was 18 homes at the time, and we will donate all this land to open space to the city or to somebody else. Nobody wanted to take this responsibility. So part of the study should be, are we willing to take that level of responsibility? I think you just don't have enough information.
I'm not suggesting the city take ownership of the other 80 acres of land or 78 acres of land. I'm suggesting potentially maybe we rezone the 78 acres as parkland, and then allow them to increase the density a little bit on the 8.6 acres, maybe not 29 units, but maybe a little more than 4. Because I think originally, if there were 4 units, that's probably going to be on 8 acres, about 2 acres per lot. And so potentially, let's say, I'm trying to find something that's workable. So I'm thinking maybe, okay, let's say it's 8 units, 1 acre per lot, or half an acre per lot, but then at most 8 acres.
I would.
So the size, the amount of land that's developed into residential is the same.
Like I said, I looked. I didn't when I looked at the designs, and I didn't have a lot of time before. I don't think this should be built. I think that it will impact riparian corridors. It will, because of the fire risks and the safe area that need to be done around it, this was going to seriously devastate the area. And that's why I thought that looking at alternatives such as transfer of development rights or some other mechanisms would be the way to go.
All right, thank you. Yeah, we're going around in circles now.
May I take the opportunity to kind of refocus the discussion back on the development, please?
Okay, I have 2 more cards. Gary Newman, followed by Lisa.
I have the same question. I mean, if we don't rezone, if it's just 4 units, if the developer only build 4 units, wouldn't they be facing the same fire hazard as? No, that's.
You will have an opportunity to
want to
okay,
know.
Gary
from
Newman,
the property owner.
followed by Lisa Warren. Welcome, Gary.
Hi, thanks. So my name is Gary Newman. My wife, daughter, and I moved to Mount Crest Place, which actually borders the proposed development and is close to Linda Vista Park, about 17 years ago. Our daughter attended Regnart, Kennedy, Monte Vista. She also swam at the local swim club that's also right down the street from Linda Vista Park. I think this proposed Canyon View development would severely damage our neighborhood in numerous ways. Just to name a few, I think the Linda Vista Park entrance will become another busy intersection in the neighborhood. Already in our neighborhood, we have blinking lights for crosswalks. We have flags for the kids to hold up when they cross busy intersections. This is just going to create another busy intersection when you have cars crossing the entrance to get to school, people walking by. Everything that goes on is just going to get busier and busier in the neighborhood that's already too busy. My daughter happened to be a classmate of Ethan Chen, the little boy who was killed by the truck while riding his bike to Kennedy a few years ago. There's been improvements with a lot of effort by the city, but traffic, pedestrian, and bicycle safety in the neighborhood is still a big problem. The Canyon View development will add even more automobiles to the neighborhood. In addition, we'll have construction trucks, heavy land moving equipment, large material deliveries, contractors, inspectors, realtors, and numerous people moving through the neighborhood continuously. During the community meeting, which I was one of the few people to attend, I guess, because it didn't get out very widely, they estimated it would take about 4 years to develop these 29 houses. So for 4 years, we're going to have extra traffic in the neighborhood. In addition, at the community meeting, this 29 houses were kind of indicated as being a first phase. So this development could go on for maybe a decade or something like that with heavy construction trucks in our neighborhood. And a lot of people have mentioned the environment already. I live there, and there's open space behind our house right now. We've seen coyotes, mountain lions, bobcats, there's plenty of snake, there's deer all over. Taking away this open space is just going to drive all those animals into the neighborhood even more than we already see them today. So in short, I think if you approve this authorization, it'll result in a lot of time and effort and money spent on studies and engineering analysis. But I think just by common sense, you could see it's not going to be a good idea for the community. Thanks.
Great. Last is Lisa Warren.
So, Mayor, I'd like to ask you a question because previously, halfway through the public comments, you said you were going to have the applicant speak.
Right, yeah, that was our mistake. The applicant should have went before the public comment.
Absolutely,
But since we already had started the public comment.
So
we'll
are
just
they going
change-
to speak?
I presume so.
Yes.
Yes, they get 10 minutes. Go.
And that's really kind of a big deal to do it out of order. So, numerous repeat reasons for this not being anywhere near ideal for this city or any city that has this situation. So step one, the process was not handled properly. Fairness has been talked about. Transparency is continually a problem in this city. It's getting better, but this can't continue to happen where there's a process, it's a big deal to put into place, and then it's not followed. It was put into place for a very good reason. It was considered how to do it. Something was adopted, and it feels like it did not happen. There's documentation that it did not happen properly. So why we're even here talking about this tonight is one thing, but it seems like you're going to talk about this. So if that's the case, I believe, along with many others who have spoken and who have not spoken, and some have gone home who would be saying the same thing, you need to deny this as it is proposed at this time. They can come back later like anyone else, but if you're going forward with this portion of the process, that would be my request. It's not ready. It's a San Jose City Council member 20 years ago said something that rings to me often. A good project in the wrong place is a bad project. This is a bad project for this place. Our environment deserves our respect. And that's not happening in a multitude of ways. This is a way you can respect the environment. I read through the written communications, and there were some very short emails that comment, this is a good plan because it will provide affordable housing. I am sorry, this is not affordable housing. This is the opposite of affordable housing. And this is quite frankly ridiculous and embarrassing that it's being proposed and that it's gotten as far as it has. I'm also upset by the fact that who the consultant is, as a former mayor of this city, and was part of the decision on how this process should work. And It's just so frustrating to be an involved resident in this city and have things like this happen over and over again. Is it impossible to have a good project here? Who knows? But I could tell you in Los Altos Hills, they're limited to the amount of dirt they can move on a hill when they develop. And the dirt that we'll have to move on this hill is incredibly disrespectful of our environment and the residents around it.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, and you know I
You're
could
done.
go on and on, but
I know. So, thank you. Now, the applicant is welcome to present. You have 10 minutes. Grace, can you put 10 minutes on the clock, or is that not possible? I'll just do 3 minutes, three and a third time.
Over here.
Okay.
Yeah, this is it.
Well, wait. Could
Okay,
the
thank
staff
you.
clarify, because many speakers have brought this up, the process question. Does the project follow the process, the GPA process?
It technically did for a GPA, a request for an even application to apply for a GPA. This is not the GPA request. So this is the step before that.
Yeah, but then I think the public comments were that they did not follow even the GPA authorization process.
They technically did, but the content of the process in the first step really should probably be the pre-process, so that when the applicant actually submits the next time, it's has more detail, enough detail in it for staff to understand the project in full. I'll put it that way.
So the application was submitted in May, right?
And it was complete, but we
so
don't.
it was considered complete.
It was. However.
That's why we consider it tonight.
Correct. Now, what didn't happen inside there was it was considered complete. What doesn't happen is, I don't want people to have the impression that we rescope the project in any way with the applicant or anything. What happens is we ask for details so that we can speak to it in a forum like this. So there was a lot of details we had to get. So that's how the process will be retooled a little bit.
And I think many members of the public also is concerned how come we didn't even hear about this project until like October, since it was submitted in May.
Because well, I'm not going to revamp the whole process.
Right, technically you only need 3 days notice.
Exactly.
Yeah,
so is the applicant ready?
So we noticed 10 days
Is it
ahead.
possible in the future when someone submit a GPA application, we at least put it on the website, here is an application that's submitted?
Yeah, we did,
Yeah.
and this is not a GPA application.
I mean,
This
the
is a request for
authorization, but still the same thing. I
No,
think,
it's
so
not.
so there's
All
no
right,
surprise.
you know, it's after midnight, or almost midnight, so let's have the applicant present. Welcome. Let me know when you're ready, I'll start the clock.
It's projected.
City Council neighbors and community members, good evening. My name is Liang Chen. I'm the owner of the Canyon View project. So first, before I start, I want to thank the city staff, especially Eric Serrano from the planning department. Without their hard work, this wouldn't be possible. So we are a Cupertino working family like most of you here. My wife used to work at Apple as an Italian engineer, and I'm a data scientist. We moved to the Bay Area about 12 years ago, bought a home in the Vernon Park neighborhood, and have been Cupertino residents since. So as Eric just pointed out, this property is 86 acres of land next to Nina Vista Park. As you can see here, the red line is the property line, and the blue line is roughly where the proposed development will be. So the property is currently zoned for 4 homes on 86 acres of land. Just to give a sense of how big the land is, the new Apple spaceship is actually only 47 acres. So instead of having 4 big mansions, we propose to build 23 single-family homes and 6 affordable housing units for average working families. And we feel this kind of strike the balance between the dire needs to supply housing and the equally important needs to minimize the impact on the community. So if you look at the Cupertino residential land use designations, our project with the average lot size of about 18,000 square feet is still the lowest. In fact, the majority of the homes in Monte Vista area have a typical lot size of 7,500 square feet. So as you can see, our density is actually much lower. So I'm glad many of you actually noticed that the property has the average slope of 48%, which is very, very difficult to build on. However, this is a big piece of land with lots of terrain varieties. While you have steep slopes, you also have a lot of flat or gentle slope areas like the picture you see here. Our goal is actually to build on those gentle slopes. So let me explain the idea using a heat map, as you can see here. So the green color represents the flat area, and the red one is steep slope. So basically, as you can see here, all the building pads we design are actually situated on flat areas, which minimize the cut and fill in grading, and also as well as the impact on natural environment. So next I want to talk about the community outreach. So over the course of 6 months, we conducted 12 small group meetings with the neighbors and communities. We visited 56 homes surrounding the property, talked to neighbors door by door about this project. In October, we actually hosted a formal neighborhood meeting where 13 guests show up. For all those community outreach activities, we learn a lot about what the community like and what they're concerned about. So from what we learned, we feel we can provide the following community benefits. The first one is a safe trail. Everyone will love the idea of a trail that connects Nina Vista Park, Stevens County Park, and Fremont Odor open space. And we're going to fund this multi-million-dollar trail from the profit of this project. So the city doesn't need to pay a penny. Secondly, we believe we're providing high-quality single-family homes that's much needed in Cupertino. In addition, we're providing 6 affordable housing units, 2 more than what's required. Yeah. And I want to show you that a lot of people we talk to love the low density of this project that preserve the natural hillside environment. Lastly, fire suppression. I heard a lot of neighbors mention fire is a concern. And by taking proper measure, I believe we can actually significantly reduce the wildfire spreading from hillside to the neighboring homes. So we are open to other ideas from the council and from the neighbors and communities. Last but not least, I hear a lot of concerns from the community. So traffic being the first one. I know that the rush hour traffic on Bob Road and the Nina Vista Drive could be pretty bad. So adding 29 units will certainly increase the traffic. Secondly, most people walk to the Linda Vista Park, many of them young kids. So it's very, very important to ensure their safety. Thirdly, for the neighbors that's actually close to the property, like Gary just mentioned, some of the lots are actually very close to the neighbors and could have loss of privacy and also the views. So we understand this, yeah. So of course the last one, people are also concerned about future phase or even phases, given that we do have flat land on the west side of the property that's not in this plan. So I think those are all, plus a lot of people here mentioned some other concerns. Those are all valid concerns. We have been working with the community to address the concerns, and we'll keep doing that. So we want to actually make this a neighborhood for my family to live in and create a trail for everyone to enjoy. We also want to make this project a win-win for everyone. So we are all ears here. I'd like to answer any questions from the council and from the neighbors as well. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you. And thank you for not going the whole 10 minutes. I'll save time.
How much time did I?
You used about 8 minutes.
That's great.
Great, thank you. Okay, so, before you leave, if there's any questions for the property owner from the council before we discuss it among ourselves.
So the one question I have is, you said there's more flat land on the other piece or the rest of the land.
Right.
What is your true thinking right now in terms of this other phase? You must have some idea in your thoughts. Okay, well, there'd be another 20 houses or another 15 houses, or, I mean, what is your true thinking at this point?
Sure. So actually, I have a slide for that one. So I can go that. So we don't have any plan for future phases. If we can develop, we will just propose now instead of waiting for the future. Because if you look at the picture here, looking this is from Coyote Ridge. So there are 10 plus acres of very nice flat land you can build. But there are a lot of challenges that we cannot overcome. The first being the 30% slope. So it's almost impossible to build a road that's 15% to satisfy the fire department. Just to give you an example, so the Lombard Street in San Francisco is only 27%. So it's almost very hard to build a road on a 30% slope, almost impossible. The second thing is the fire department needs a secondary fire access, and we don't have that as well. The third challenge is that the current floor is about 180 feet lower than the ridge here. So basically, if you build a home there, you'll have to have a sewage pump to pump all the sewage up to the ridge, and then by gravity, they can go down to Lina Vista Drive. For all those challenges, we don't think that area is buildable. But if anyone has any idea that we can build, then that's great. Maybe we can utilize that land. Yeah.
But we heard today, and other people have talked to me, that in one of the public meetings, the consultant mentioned a phase 2. So we're just wondering where that phase 2 is located.
That's certainly not a official consultant of our team. Yeah.
I see. Okay.
Yeah.
So if you don't plan on building on the rest of the land, are you open for us to just rezone that part to be PR public parkland?
That's a possibility
So-
we can consider. For now, my plan is to keep that as private open space for my future generations.
It's private land, it's still your property, but then just take residential zoning away from that part.
That's possible. Yes, we can discuss. I think once the council approve the gateway, I think there are a lot of details to flesh out, as many of the neighbors mentioned, right? So, yeah.
Because many of the public would like us to preserve the public open space, so maybe that's a compromise. We ensure majority of the land will be open space.
Yeah, that's certainly something we can flesh out. Yeah.
Another question I think one member of public asked is the road that you propose in your property. So
Yes.
there is a road that goes through the 25 houses.
Right.
29. So is that going to be a public road, or you will maintain that road? It will be a private road?
So the plan is that it will be a private road maintained by the 29 units living there. But if the city wants to take over that, I'm more than welcome to do
I
that.
wouldn't want to.
Yeah.
Another concern is I don't want to add any liability for the city. So if
there will be
it-
now- yeah.
then it will be, you will have a homeowners association, they will maintain those together.
That's right. Yeah, that's a plan. But again, like I said, if the city wants to maintain the road, that'd be great too.
Another issues people raised were the water pressure. The water
Yeah.
pressure around that area is already very low.
Yes.
And so who is going to pump all the waters, finish all the pipes and the sewage also? I think Rose also mentioned the sewage system in there. Also, they have to pump it up. It's just complicated. So are you going to take responsibility for developing all this infrastructure?
So you have two questions. The first one is the water pressure. So I actually
And the water
talked to
pipe, yeah.
Yeah. So the first question is water pressure. I actually talked to a few neighbors on Monocrest Place, and their concern is right now their water pressure is too low, so that they have to have their own pump to pump the water. So I think if we are gonna face the same problem, we're gonna fix their problem at the same time. So that can serve as one benefit to the neighbors. So in terms of sewage, we actually work with the sewage. There's no capacity sewage. There's no problem with the capacity. So all the Cupertino sewage actually flows through Santa Clara, city of Santa Clara. Right now, there's no capacity issue for that. So, yeah, so I don't see any problems, both on the
if I may, so that kind of project specific where we get into the engineering and all that stuff would be really at the planning design phase, where we would work with the sanitary district, with the water company and the utilities to ensure there's adequate service to the site, and then whatever infrastructure improvements need to be made will be tied to that project.
Oh, I think one of the public comment was the economic analysis did not address this potential financial liability for the city for all this infrastructure.
So
would there be any?
The infrastructure costs are paid by the applicant, not by the city.
Okay, so it won't be,
Yeah.
but then the future maintenance, would that be onto the city?
Future
If the
maintenance-
water pipe might be easily broken in a hillside area,
Right.
would that be our liability?
No, I don't believe so.
Typically, it's the property owner on the property's responsibility. Where the city takes over is where the main, where the street and the public right-of-way, we're responsible for that underground infrastructure. Up to the property line.
To the property line.
Correct.
But then there are 25 houses. They each own their lot. I don't know who is going to own
property owner.
the private road and the pipe that goes through.
Presumably the
all
homeowners association.
There will be a
Take it
homeowners
at the point where it
association.
However it's
turns
arranged.
private.
Will
yeah.
take care of that?
There'll be a maintenance agreement and other agreements in order to ensure that all of that infrastructure is maintained. And that
Okay.
happens whether you have a 3-lot subdivision that has privately owned utilities or a 25.
Good, yeah. I want to be sure that the city would not be liable. Okay.
Well, as an example, let me just give a short example. The main underneath my house broke. I was responsible for the part of the main that was on my property, then the city connected and was responsible for bringing it up to my house.
I think Rose, when I met with her, she said that her water pipe broke like 3 times in a very short period of time, so she was concerned about that.
So is that because the water pressure is too high, or what?
Because of the slope. I think she said in her house, the slope is very steep, so it's easier for the water pipe to break. That's your future property owner will have to be responsible for their own pipes.
Either way, the action before the council tonight is not about those details. That'd be worked out if it gets way down the road. So I would encourage us to focus.
Yeah, we can bring it back to council now if there's no other questions for the applicant. Sorry, Ron.
Yeah, I would appreciate if you could elaborate on exactly what you're prepared to do to create this trail that we've been talking about. And I'm less interested in exactly where the alignment is, but I am interested in how you would propose to handle the slope stability issues that did ensnare the prior proposal in the area of the old quarry.
Okay.
Are you prepared to pay to create an ecologically sound trail that would take us to Stevens Canyon Park?
Yes, that's for sure. So, like I said, we want to create a neighborhood for my family to live in, and a trail that for the community to enjoy. So, I want to create a safe trail. I myself is an avid hiker, and I can assure you that once the trail is done, it will be much less strenuous than the other trails you have seen, for example.
Do you understand the concerns that people have voiced this evening about it being so steep as to perhaps preclude a lot of walkers and
that's what I'm getting to.
Bikers?
Yeah. So if you look at the green section of the trail, which is pretty much from the entrance of Linda Vista Park to the mountain ridge, the average slope is 15%. I heard one gentleman... 15%. So one gentleman mentioned that that's very strenuous. I don't know his experience, but based on my own experience, I have hiked many local long trails. The only trail, the Sky to the Sea trail. I also hike the Rain to Rain trail in Grand Canyon. So the 15% is very easy trail for a hiker. Many of you might have different experience, but this is very easy trail. I just guarantee you. But there's, like I said, there's the 30% slope down. Let's go here. There's a 30% slope about 400 feet.
Is this a picture of the old quarry?
Yes.
Is that what we're looking at on the left here?
That's right. So 15% will get you from the entrance of Linda Vista Park to the top of the ridge here. And then you're facing a 30% slope, which is pretty strenuous. What we'll have to do is we'll have to have the switchback down to the quarry. Then it's very flat. That will increase the cost of the trail a lot. But again, like I said, we're going to finance the trail all by ourselves. The city doesn't need to.
This would be a trail that somebody could bike on or walk on?
For the switchback, I'm not sure for now, but I hope we can actually build a trail that can actually for the cyclists to bike down too. I myself bike to work from Cupertino to the Bay, taking the Stevenson Creek Trail for 3-4 years. So I have no idea whether we can design a trail that's bikeable, but we'll try.
So, thank you. That helps me.
Yeah, thank you.
I have some more questions for staff.
Can I verify? So you are prepared to finance the trail from the trailhead at Linda Vista Park to the county park? Stevens Creek
not all
County
the
Park?
way, not all the way.
But you don't
so
own
basically just
that
to
middle
the,
part of the land?
Well, it's basically to the border of my property, because I cannot build a trail
from
on
here
the neighboring.
To
about here.
That's here, the border of your property, right?
From the green one, start from the Linda Vista Park to the quarry floor and go up the
So
Coyote
maybe
Ridge Trail.
zigzagging
That's about
here.
here, yeah.
And then, so how much farther do we have to go to get to the county park?
So the next section I have is about 2,000, almost 2,000 feet, maybe another 700 feet, something like that.
I think someone else
And
owns that
do
property.
we know who owns that land? Is it the prior owner that owned all of this, or is it somebody else?
I think the private owner sold it to another person.
I see. Have you been in communication? Because when I asked you earlier, it sounded like you were prepared to create a trail that went all the way to the county park. But I guess if you don't have the rights to do that, then you'd have to be in discussion with them in order for us to realize this complete trail.
That's right, yeah.
So do you know who that entity is, and have you been in any discussion?
So I haven't directly worked with the owner, but the person, some people I know have talked to the project owner, and seems they are okay to have the trail pass their property.
Okay, but you haven't had that communication.
I haven't done
directly.
that directly, yeah.
Okay. All right, thank you.
So is that part the Parkside Trails project site?
So this route, again, is the what proposed by the Parkside Trail feasibility study. I'm not sure if this is I've been hiking this area many times. I have a couple of alternative route, which might be better, but actually I will work with the trail, Friends of Stevens Creek Trail, and Walk and Bike Society in Cupertino to hike this area to get their expert experience, suggestions on this.
Yeah, I think we are talking about, here is your property, and here is the Stevens Creek County Park. There is this narrow strip of land that you don't own. We need to cross over to the county park. We don't know who owns that.
I don't know directly, but someone I know said that they have been in contact with the owner. Yeah.
Okay. I have a question regarding the BMR housing.
Yes.
So what you are proposing right now is the requirement is 4 lots, and you are proposing 6 lots. How do we calculate the requirement for 4 lots?
Yeah, so it's
10%? No, 15%, right?
15%.
15% of the number of units.
Correct.
But it's supposed to be comparable in size.
Correct.
But then the 6 units you are proposing now is much smaller than the 4,000 square foot house, single family home.
I never
it's
heard
not exactly 15%.
So we're talking about 2 things. One is the number of units, right? So the number of units satisfy the 50% requirement. Instead of a FAR, I don't think there is a requirement that the affordable housing unit needs to be comparison as a market rate home, because otherwise we are building at least 2,800 square feet affordable housing units. That just doesn't make sense.
I agree that it doesn't make sense to build for comparable size affordable housing home that's 4,000 square foot. However, our BMR manual does require 15% units, and the units does have to be comparable in size.
And I would caution, please don't use affordable housing and BMR housing as the same thing, because they're very different. We're talking about BMR housing here, not affordable housing.
Okay, yeah. I guess the question I really want to get to is I think one thing the staff proposed is a potential option of giving city the lot, and we can sell the lot to a property owner and get the cash so that we can build the BMR housing elsewhere. Would that be something you would consider? So because below market rate housing in that location is kind of far away from all the transit. So, but then if you dedicate the lot in place for affordable housing fund, we can sell the lot, someone else can buy it, but then the money from the sale could go into the city BMR housing fund to fund actual affordable housing in areas that's closer to transit, right? Is that we were thinking? Is that something that you would consider?
So again, I'm open to any suggestions from the city council and also the community. I'm okay either way, but it's just what's best for the city, right? So we actually need the land to build affordable housing units or the BMR units. It's not a matter of we are lacking the fund. Sometimes we are actually lacking the land to build. And this is a big piece of land to utilize, and we can use it for BMR units. Yeah. So I don't think having BMR units in this single-family community is gonna destroy the environment or anything, because if you look at Oak Valley, they do have BMR units within the single-family housing units. And it's a very great example of how we can, by better design, we can actually make it very natural.
That's true, yeah. I actually like that you made it triplex. And so from the outside, it probably would look like any other single-family home.
Yes, they should look like very similar, but they are BMR units, so they are smaller.
Okay, so we can bring it back to council now. So who would like to go first? I can go first. All right.
I'll start with just a technical question of staff, which I think is pretty important. And so when we talk about fire, so here's 86 acres, and after what we've seen over and over with the fires in Northern California and Southern California, if the power line were to get blown down, start a fire, and the Forest Service has to put out that fire, I think the power company is responsible for all that activity to put out the fire, I think. PG&E or whoever it is. If they were the cause of the fire, they're responsible for it? Am I correct or am I not? Is the state going to cover that fire activity and not charge?
That is our understanding.
What, that the state covers it?
The PG&E would be
Okay,
responsible,
great.
at least I'm finding out.
Great, so now we've got that. Now you've got this piece of property, let's say, and lightning starts the fire. So now you can't blame the power company. There's a reason I'm going with this. So lightning starts the fire, they have to fly the planes in, they dump the fire retardant, somebody's got to pay for that. Well, it wasn't the property owner's fault, and it wasn't the power company's fault, so the state conceivably, I would think, would be going to cover that. Okay, now you've got those two extremes, the state or city covering it versus PG&E. Now you've got 86 acres of property, you put in these houses, and now you have property owners with barbecues in their backyard. And as we heard from the residents, that fires on a hillside are a very significant fire problem. Very different than houses in a city, where if my barbecue in my backyard starts the bush on fire, there's a limited amount that can be consumed, but on 86 acres, if that fire is started by a homeowner, who pays for it? When we're talking about a massive fire on 86 acres that was caused by the housing that was then put on it, who would pay for that? Is that going to go back to the property owner?
I think an insurance company will decide who pays for
Well,
it.
there's a good.
But I mean, honestly, it would be anybody's. I mean, without really knowing, it would be anybody's guess. But possibly the homeowner that started the fire.
Same
But-
with the lightning strike.
Right.
Would occur to me it would be homeowners insurance or something.
But wouldn't the power line be underground in that area? It's not.
No, this is just a hypothetical case trying to determine our liability.
Okay, yeah,
Are
but
you
I,
talking about the
there-
cost to?
but I want to know if the power line in that area is underground or not.
Well, I don't think
Because
there
in my
are
home,
right now.
in my home area, it's underground. So in the new development, do we require them to be underground?
Normally, we do.
do?
Require undergrounding of underground utilities. We haven't looked at the particulars of this case. We don't know what the challenges might be of doing that here. We would have to review all of
So
that as part of the project.
Normally, you mean we have a city code for new development, we require power line to be underground when
Correct.
feasible.
Correct. And so it's a feasibility issue, and we don't know what that is at this point.
So if it were underground, there is less likelihood for fire?
Correct.
Due
As
to
far as
power line.
utilities go, yes.
So that area, currently in that area, are the power lines up above ground or underground?
Over there, I think on Lindy Lane, I think they are undergrounded.
So
But
likely
portions are at
should
least.
should
And
make
so
sense.
we just have to see what we don't know. It'll depend on what PG&E
Right,
says.
and there's a
on our-
difference between the high voltage power lines and the power lines to each house.
Correct.
It's easy to put the ones to each house underground, but the high voltage power lines is very difficult, but I don't think they're in that area. I know where they are up there because I saw them recently.
They are on the other side, yeah.
But the questions that I'm really asking, to me, are fundamental questions that we would need to know before making a significant decision. One is the fire, and it was brought up by the residents. One is when we change the zoning for hillside property, and you have other parcels, other property owners, and conceivably we have to be fair. So the other property owners, like you heard one or two speak tonight, do I get to subdivide my property? We would need to know, we would need something put out on the table as a suggestion, which we don't have. I mean, how many properties, how many acres would essentially fall in this type of category if we were to make this decision? 6 months from now or a year from now, the next property owner comes and says, well, I've got 150 acres and I want 50 houses. We would need to know if this is the only one, if the border is, Saratoga or Los Altos, and it's not our decision, it's not our issue, then more or less we don't need to talk about it. But if the surrounding property is Cupertino, we would need to know what type of thing would we have to deal with. The next one being the impact on the environment. So when we go and start disturbing significant amount of land for roads, for clearance, things of that nature, the habitat that's going to be affected, again, we would need, city staff to tell us, and you probably don't have the expertise, but you would need to get some guidance, how much is going to be impacted by, disturbing, all this property, so that we could then decide on each of these items, geez, does this make sense, or are these things going to be too much of a challenge for this, and that the potential
Yeah.
project needs to be, done in a way that is more appropriate? Because to
Right.
me, a
And-
general plan, the request to move forward means they've got the project, and we're now talking about, gee whiz, is the road going to do this little snake or that little snake, but everything's pretty much. And yet, I'm finding that I don't have, a good idea of how this would actually even play out to be signaling to the developer, present us with your general plan amendment, and so I'm really looking to staff to be more detailed in the types of things we on the council would need to make a decision of this nature, this magnitude.
With all due respect, Councilmember Willie, in this stage of the game, we don't have the details either. So what you're doing is either approving or disapproving a request from an applicant to apply for a GPA. You're not even approving a GPA.
Right, so-
You're just approving the request to apply.
Right,
for a
we need to
GPA.
remember that. We're getting into too much detail here.
Too much detail at this stage of the game.
So-
We don't have any answers.
So I would like to go next and move this along. It's already 12:30. So I see two positives to this project. One, it's providing more ownership housing. And two, there's at least one school under there that's under-enrolled, Regnart Elementary. And those are the two positives I see. So there's several negatives. The poor road access, and I want to make it clear, due to recent state laws, we are not talking about 23 single-family homes and 2 units with 3 townhouses. So we should make that clear. Every single-family home can now have 2 accessory dwelling units, and there's nothing the city can do about it. We can't put any deed restrictions in, and if you're building a new house now, you would probably want to do the ADUs at the same time because it's a lot more cost-efficient to do that. So we're really talking about 80 units here. 23 times 3 is 69, and then the multifamily housing can have even more than 2 ADUs. And also, the state law says an ADU can be within 4 feet of the property line. So if you had a fence, you could put the ADU within 4 feet. So it's something we really need to consider, including for fire danger. I find the public benefits to be not in line with the increase in value we're granting to that property. I calculated, I had to actually increase it based on what the staff said they would sell for. So I calculated we would be increasing the value of that property between $56 million and $92 million versus building the 4 houses with 2 ADU units each. And there's really there is BMR housing. There would be those 6 BMR units, but there would actually be no affordable housing, which is what we really are trying to do in Cupertino, and we want more affordable housing, and BMR housing is great, and that would be good too, but the affordable housing is what we're really short of. I think there's too many trees to be removed. I think it sets a bad precedent for future other property owners that are going to want to subdivide as well. And as I think it was our housing commissioner was saying, let's see, where is what Connie said? I can't, that she could tolerate projects that have conflicts with the general plan. And yeah, in some cases, yeah, I would agree with that sentiment. But in this case, this is just too much in that area for a 48% average slope. There's the fire danger. Let's see. Oh, the other issue is with the ADU laws that were passed, you are forbidden from requiring any additional parking. And even if you turn, right now in Cupertino, if you have a house with a 2-car garage and 2 parking spaces in the driveway, according to state law, if you turn the garage into an ADU, you don't have to add any replacement parking. So in fact, you're increasing the number of cars because you have more people, but you're decreasing the amount of parking. So we're going to end up, well, I guess it's a private road, but you would end up somehow having cars parked on that road, or I just don't know where they would park. And one of the members of the public was mentioning about Cupertino's reputation in terms of housing. And, you know, we've seen a lot of stuff in the media. I called into KQED yesterday when somebody was claiming that we hadn't built a single unit of housing since Apple Park was built. And just because someone says something in the media, because they're being told to say that because of who they work for, it doesn't actually mean that it's true and that we should be believing it. There's the proximity to Lehigh, the Lehigh plant, building on the ridge of the hills. Let's see what else I had on my list here. So I think that that's all I had. And, you know, the purpose of the GPA gateway process, it's intended to prevent wasting the planning department's time on projects where the GPA would never be approved. So if you're just a little bit off, we say, okay, you can go through the gateway and we'll work with you to modify it so it will meet something that the council could approve. But I mean, at least for me, in this case, there would just be no way to modify this in order to get it to go through. It really needs a whole new submission in the next cycle. And the next time, the public needs to be more involved at the beginning in order to craft a project that could be more acceptable. So that's all I have on this. Thank you. Who wants to go next? Darcy?
I'm wondering about the assertions regarding ADUs. Is it true that for every single-family home that's built, you could get an ADU as well as a junior ADU unit on each of these plots?
That's my reading of the new law, yes.
Okay. And so if we were really looking to limit to the proposed amount, then we would need to limit it to essentially 9 or 10 single-family housing units. Is that correct?
If you wanted to ensure that there would not be any units above what the project is purporting to apply for now, I mean, yeah, there would be a possibility they could build more if you didn't limit the number of single-family homes to begin with.
Okay, so there's no Hillside exemption for this law allowing extra ADUs, is there?
There may be some fire zone exemptions that we might need to look into if this is a high severity fire zone.
Probably is.
It is. It's in the urban wildfire interface or wildlife interface. So there's specific building codes that they have to comply with and stuff like that.
And so I would need to double check state law about whether that takes them out of this ADU requirement. I've seen some of those fire severity zone exemptions in other state laws that are trying to streamline housing approvals, and
remember, there's
3
different ADU laws.
Yes, I know, right. So I don't have them all in my head and all the provisions.
Some of them overlap.
Right. So we would have to look into that further, I guess.
Right. I mean, to me, that's a pretty pivotal detail to know about whether we're really looking at 29 units or something closer to 90 potentially. And then, okay, from what you know, how does that apply to the multifamily units, the 2 triplexes? So on a plot of land where you have a triplex, how many ADUs, assuming that there's no exemption for Hillside or fire hazard, how many ADUs could be built on a plot of
I
land.
guess it would depend on how the ownership of those, whether those units are ownership or whether it is truly just like a triplex. Because if it is just a triplex, then I do believe that they're allowed 2 detached ADUs in the common spaces, and then any number of ADUs within common spaces within the building that are underutilized, such as corridors or laundry rooms or things like that that are shared but underutilized or can be reconfigured. They could build ADUs in that as well.
And then what about the garage as an additional ADU?
Well, if it's underutilized,
Well, who?
again,
Yeah,
we'd have to look into the
thought it
law
was-
further.
I thought it was pretty explicit that you could convert your garage to an ADU, and no additional parking could be required by the city.
Correct, but I mean, these are very fresh
Right,
laws.
they're very
and
new
we're-
laws, yes.
we are still reviewing everything that there is to it.
But if they were ownership, if they were 3 separate condos in the triplex, then what?
I guess it would depend on whether they were configured as single-family units or not, and in that case, they could have 1 ADU and 1 junior ADU.
Each of the
For
triplex,
each of them,
then that
correct.
would be
It just
6.
depends, and I'm not, if they're attached, we'd have to look at it. We'd really have to evaluate it against
And out
current
of
law.
curiosity, on lots of this relatively large size for us, how big could the ADU and junior ADU be?
Under state law, I believe they have to be allowed, I think it says one law says 800 square feet, another says 850 square feet, so
So
I
something
think
like
there's-
that. And
yes.
that's true of, the
And that's-
junior is the attached one, or?
A junior is inside the actual home
Okay.
itself, and it has
So
to have a
It
kitchen.
wouldn't be a
but
separate standing structure, it would be,
The ADU could be detached. The ADU could be,
junior
junior
ADU could
ADU
be-
may not be. Junior
okay,
ADU.
so really what we're talking about is doubling the number of buildings with a separate dwelling unit within the main
Correct.
house.
You know, I think we need to
right?
look into that. I thought one of the ADU laws allowed 2 detached ADUs if the lot was large enough for that.
My
But I have to
understanding
go
is
look
that
at
is for
that.
multifamily dwelling units and not necessarily for single
Okay.
family.
Okay.
Okay, just to get some clarity on that issue, I think we should, for the sake of this particular, aspect, take a look at what the status of the laws are and see, could this potentially end up being, 50 structures? Could it be 70 structures with, potentially additional, depending upon the ownership properties of the multifamily units? I mean, I think there's a bit of an unclarity as to what precisely the residential impact would be here. And it's not insignificant. You're talking anywhere
Right.
from.
I did want to just point one thing out. I think state law essentially says that ADUs are not to be considered density for purposes of density calculations.
Right.
There is a statement in there somewhere in the law that says that, which doesn't mean that there aren't any impacts to utilities and other things, but it does state that.
But to be fair, every existing single-family homes in all the entire Cupertino could add 2 extra ADUs. It's not just like only these new homes will do that.
One
right?
ADU and 1 junior ADU.
So 1 ADU and 1 junior, so every home can do that.
Correct.
We could see triple number of homes
Right.
anywhere.
Which is the purpose of the law, yes.
Yeah. So I think we shouldn't penalize them for that because it's to be fair.
Well, I mean, I think, I guess the point is we're not entitling the 20,000 existing homes in Cupertino. We're potentially looking at this undeveloped piece of land and trying to figure out, what our appetite is for development ultimately there, given the landscape of current rules and regulations. So, I think there's just some unclarity there. With regard to a number of the other issues that have been raised, I think, we can, I would have some appetite for looking at it along the process, but just having a lack of clarity as to how many structures can potentially go onto this. Because I would say that if there is no exemption, then maybe if we were looking at trying to support around the number that are being proposed here, maybe we encourage the the property owner to go back, make larger plot sizes, and say, bring us a proposal with 10 units, and then our anticipation is that perhaps there would be an additional, couple of ADU units, on each of those.
And remember, no impact fees with ADUs.
Right, no impact fees. I mean, I think we need to get a better sense of how this is affected by our current housing, laws, and, I'd be willing to entertain, another round, but, based upon the current proposal and what we know of, how this could potentially, look in 5 or 10 years, I'd like just to get a little bit more clarity. So if we were to consider it right now, I would encourage the property owner to go back and, work with staff to find out what the potential impacts are long-term. And then if they are indeed, what we're considering as, kind of triple the amount being considered, then I would encourage them to go back and, cut down on the number so that we're looking at something that is more reflective of what they're proposing to us here. So, and then as for, I think trails are very important, but I do appreciate the fact that some of the environmental considerations are such that we might have, very much larger cost estimates as to what it might take to make sure that the wildlife concerns are addressed. And so I would encourage the property owner, if they were very much serious about being in keeping with the local concerns, to work together with groups such as Audubon Society, and of course it seems like you've started working with the Friends of Stevens Creek Trail, and the other environmental stakeholders in the area to see, what would be, optimal. And so, I mean, I haven't heard a cost estimate, and I understand that we're very early on in the process, but I mean, I would imagine they could vary quite a bit based upon, what the particular requirements of this area are. So those are my two main ones. One thing I will say is that originally, in terms of this gateway process for considering general plan amendments, about 4 years ago, I wasn't particularly in favor of it because it's kind of thought, well, if you really want to give community benefits, then kind of package it in with the request. And but I think my main concern with it was that it was forcing general plan amendment meetings essentially 4 times a year, when originally we wouldn't necessarily have one in a given year. And so I thought it would add a lot of work. But I mean, if we're going down that path, then I think it's legitimate to think about what kind of community benefits we would be looking at, since that's really kind of the impetus of why this process exists in the first place. And so I am a bit compelled by the idea that if you're looking at 15% of 25 single-family units that are 4,000 square feet, that you're not necessarily getting more than we would normally get in terms of at least land value or home value by getting, 2 triplexes. I don't know what the square footage of the triplexes would be. To me, looking at the original map, it looks like the housing plots are roughly the same as the other housing plots. And so, I would very much like to look at the numbers as to what the actual, escalated values would be. I mean, are they closer to 40 million or 90 million or?
Yeah, well, I have a spreadsheet I did.
And the mayor has a
You're welcome to
spreadsheet,
see.
I mean, you've got your pro formas, they've got their pro formas. I think if we're going to go down this path, then we should really take a look at, what are the specific community benefits we could be reasonably asking for. And, if we're bargaining on behalf of the public and we've been placed into this position, then let's take a look at, what the potential benefits are. And in the interest of full disclosure, I did meet with the property owner over the weekend, and I understand that there is a willingness to work with the council and the public with regard to being open about what those pro formas look like. So I mean, I don't want to close off the possibility in the future of this development happening, but I do agree with some of the apprehensions in terms of what are the impacts. Let's be very careful. This is, after all, essentially an open space. I would very much encourage the idea that if you're building on 10 acres and you have an 86 acre piece of property, that you very seriously consider, if this does go forward eventually, ceding over that 76 acres for open space purposes in essentially perpetuity. I think that could, go a long ways to, making sure that this becomes more palatable, in, not just from a community perspective, but from an environmental perspective as well. But I think there's a lot of cause for optimism in terms of the prospects moving forward, but there's also a lot of work to be done as well. So, all right. In the interest of time, I'll leave it at those items.
Rod, do you want to have anything else?
Sure. I had a couple questions for staff, so we didn't get to that yet. So the access to this development that would be put through on a private road, a rather steep private road, is via Linda Vista Park. Does this property owner have the right to demand that? Like, let's say they came in with a project that conformed on the basis of density, 4 homes. Would we?
We would typically give access to the city's right-of-way for
Even though
parcels.
it's through the entrance to a public park
we would
that's
work
gated and so
yeah,
forth?
We would work with, Public Works would work with them to make sure all the necessary improvements, the infrastructure, the safety requirements are in place to.
It's a little bizarre, right? Because
yeah, it is. It's kind of
it's not a road.
Yeah.
There's no road sign. It's just the entrance to a park, and then you go in, a few hundred feet, and then you turn left.
Yeah,
and go up this hill.
Yeah, exactly.
Interestingly, the entrance to the park is public right-of-way over there, where the property actually abuts that right-of-way, which is where they're pulling that driveway entrance
So
from.
they would have a reasonable right as the owner of the property to
For access?
ask us to provide that
I believe
access.
so, and we would, again, work with them to.
Okay, so if they came in, so just to be clear, and I appreciate Darcy's comments about how this could help us facilitate, achieving a balance between the interests of the community and the interests of the property owner. So thank you. I was delighted to hear that. And I think that, here's the deal. We have Foothill Boulevard. We have people that have been killed on Foothill Boulevard biking. It's not exactly very pedestrian friendly, and it is our only access into the whole Stevens Creek Canyon. A wonderful ecosystem. You can go all the way up the canyon to Black Mountain and beyond, all the way to all that open space that was preserved so many decades ago, starting in Palo Alto, right? And so I think, to me, thinking about how we might facilitate a trail for biking and walking, I'd want to do both, would be compelling. But I think to do that, right, there would be a tremendous effort required to understand the slope stability, geology issues, to understand the ecology issues, and construct something, provide a plan to construct something in a way that, would be, as one speaker said, sensitive to what's going on there. I think an important principle for me here would be, the importance of having the public have access to interconnect that whole county park system without having to go down that darn road that has all the trucks taking stuff to and from the Stevens Creek quarry. But as Stevens says, right, the intensity here is pretty high. And so understanding that in combination with the new bills, I think would be, and as Darcy says, would be quite important. So I guess I'm kind of on the same page as Darcy.
And I would say the property owner, when this was originally proposed back, I guess in May, didn't know about the all these bills would
Well, no, sure.
would become
So
law.
that-
So I think if they
yeah.
come back in the next round, they can do
Yeah.
something that is more palatable.
Right, and I think to Stephen's point, right, understanding the value we would be creating. I understand the argument that says, well, we don't consider general plan amendments just at will or at whimsy, right? The reason we would do that is because we think there's something to be really gained for the public. And so I don't think saying a hotel gets a little higher because we're deriving some public benefit, or yes, we can upzone a property to get a public benefit. These things are done by cities all the time. I mean, so I think that's okay. That doesn't mean we need to upzone all these properties, but yeah, from the looks of it here, there are some real challenges, and I'd want to understand that better before having a lot more work done by our planning department in proceeding to process a real application. And I think we'd want to satisfy ourselves that some of these issues, and for me, right, a more concrete proposal about, okay, how would we get a trail, not just to our property, between our property line and the next one, but all the way through. I would want to understand what that looks like and have some real work done on geology and feasibility. I know when this came up before. What's that?
Nothing.
I know when this came up before, one of the ideas we thought about, right, was to have Post somehow be involved in the transaction if we weren't in a position to proceed. But what I heard tonight was a willingness to, we're going to fund this thing, we're going to make it go. So, okay.
So
I'd like to
Post
see-
is Peninsula Open
Peninsula
Space?
Open Space Trust.
Okay.
So that they'll typically take land donations as a nonprofit, and then sometime, maybe decades later, when a public agency wants to do something, in this case, it could be the county of Santa Clara in combination with the city, then at some point we take that part of the property that can be used for public access and do something. So maybe there's something that can come of this. But I'd like to know more about how an ecologically sensitive trail and erosion issues and other things would be handled. I mean, just incidentally, I've been talking to some folks who have property up on hills and canyons, and this also is I know in Saratoga an issue. They're not able to get fire insurance anymore. So, if you think that we're blowing through 1.5 degrees climate, 1.5 C, and we're going to blow through 2, and maybe the trajectory is more like 4 or 5 degrees centigrade, and the land is going to get twice as hot as the average temperature. What we're going to see in the next few years, we can talk about red-legged frogs, but frankly, the ecology of our area is going to change quite fundamentally, as it will everywhere. It was said that Boston will have the climate of Charleston, South Carolina. So I think a lot of things are going to change around here, and that wildfire risk may make certain places in cities in these hillsides basically uninsurable. So, that's not going to be necessarily on the city, but I think these are hard questions to contemplate, right? So, anyway.
Okay.
Maybe that's enough.
Vice Mayor.
So first, I have some question about the lot size. So this is a map of the different lot. I think most of the people who live close to, this is a site. Most people who live close are like here. What's the lot size on this area? There are some really tiny ones here, but then most of the ones that's in the south part, is that 2 acre, 1 acre? Because some public says that, okay, if a person gets to subdivide, they'd like to subdivide too. Well, there are already precedents of many smaller lots. So
Correct.
this won't be the first. But then I guess I would like to they should be comparable too. So I'd like to know what are the sizes of these ones.
Let me clear this out. So this is our zoning map, and kind of shows in the Hillside zone. This area is actually in our Hillside transition zone, so it's the transition from typical valley floor to the hillside. At this point, the RHS 80 is, the 80 refers to the minimum lot size. It's 80 times 1,000, so you had 80,000 square feet per lot in order to subdivide. So if someone in this...
Oh, that's what the 80 means.
Yeah,
I
so
didn't know. So this RHS 80
means 80,000 square feet lots, minimum. So if they wanted to subdivide, they would need to have at least 160,000 to have 2 lots, because it would have to meet the zoning requirement after the subdivision. So all these parcels...
so 80,000 is how many acres?
Yeah, about
Close
2
acres.
little more than 2 acres.
Okay. Then, but this part is not labeled. There is no RHS number for this site.
Once subdivided, it would be established with a rezoning process. So, for example, the general plan identifies this to have a density which allows up to 4 units. Once the property owner comes in, they would be allowed to do a clustered subdivision under the Hillside subdivisions ordinance that we have. And based on that, the final number would be established, and the rest would have to be rezoned open space. But that's only if the general plan land use designation stays what it is currently. Now, with the general plan amendment process, and we come up with a different general plan designation, then we'd have to figure out what all of this would become and what it would have to be.
I don't fully understand that. So you mentioned we have 3 different types of hillside designation.
Correct. And so the 3 hillside designation types...
But right now, the current zoning is which one?
So the hillside designation is in the land use plan, the general plan land use plan. And so there are 3 different designations. One is the very low density, which is the 5 to 20 slope density formula, which means the lot sizes range from 5 acres to 20 acres. Based on the slope of the lot, the minimum lot sizes need to be between 5 and 20 acres. Based on the general plan, there is a formula in the general plan that determines what the minimum lot size is by the slope of the property. There's the very low density half-acre slope density formula, which means that the smallest lot size is about half an acre. Based on the slope again. So it kind of looks to, I think it goes up to about 43% slope for that particular designation. And then it says any slopes greater than 43%, you're allocated like a certain amount of, minuscule amount of units. And so you would have to really get up to a very large amount of land to get additional units on there. And then you have the very low density slope density formula, which also is, again, based on slope. And then if we did the math based on these 2 formulae here, this property yields 17 dwelling units per acre if we were to change the general plan designation to either this or that. And if the council...
What's the current designation?
It's this one here.
So current one is this one, 5 to 20 acres.
The most restrictive, yes.
The current one is 5 to 20 acres. Oh, okay. So likely we can maybe rezone a part, a very small part, maybe like 8 to 10 acres into either this, maybe like half an acre if the slope, depending on the slope, right?
Well, because what you're essentially doing is taking the density from the entire site and applying it to a small portion of the site. So you're really upzoning or up-densifying one portion of the site. So if you applied the general plan formula over the 86 acres, you would yield 17 units. But
Oh,
what you're thinking about doing is only looking at 8 acres and upzoning
Yeah,
that.
if I separate that, if we separate that the 8 acres or 10 acres that's closer to the Linda Vista Park and apply this formula, that's for example, how many units would
We'll have to look
be
at that. We have
reasonable?
not done those evaluations at this time.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
So very respectfully, I would like to say that this is a much larger conversation, this whole question of density. So I would encourage council to bring back the original action and
Or maybe suggest the applicant to resubmit in
that is part of
30
the
days or in the next cycle, right?
that's part of the process.
Yeah, so I think we do need housing, and then I don't want to invade in open space, but that's why I'd like to limit where the housing is, but then in exchange, I would like to zone the rest of the land PR, or just keep so that we are sure the rest will be open space. There is no phase 2 or 3. And phase 1 will be here is the 8 or 10 acres allowed to develop, but we do allow them to develop more than 4, maybe 8, maybe 10. And so that's something it seems Darcy is thinking about similar thing. And another thing I'd like to clarify is BMR. So our BMR does say 15% and comparable in size. And I think you told me that according to the current one, they are required to provide 4 units, but it should be 4 lots, not 4 units. It should be 4 lots comparable in size.
That is correct.
Right, so for that, what the current application did not really provide sufficient benefit. It didn't even meet the minimum requirement. So that's something that should be fixed in the next cycle. At least we want to meet the requirement, and then you consider benefit. And then another thing, I didn't meet with the applicant this time. I met with him before the election. At that time, I told him, I think Cupertino needs more senior housing. And that location, if there were smaller senior housing, senior community, many people would be able to downsize, live there, and still walk to Linda Vista Park. No? Oh, so service too far away from services.
I mean, we're really
Okay.
digressing
Yeah.
here.
I think we are trying to tell them what would be what we would consider for right.
I mean, but as you
Don't we want to give them
pointed
direction?
out, the staff, it should have been never even accepted because it didn't even meet the minimum BMR requirement in the first place. And they're free to come back in 30 days and meet with us in the meantime. I can't imagine in 30 days they could redo this.
Maybe it's the next cycle,
It's probably
yeah.
the next 6-month cycle.
But I think we should still provide our feedback so they know what to follow. Right. Okay.
Are you done?
No. So the entrance to the park, I have a question on that. I think your lot number 1 actually. So according to, is there a map like here? So here is the lot number 1, but I think this is all you own the entire property, actually up to the road, right? So how come you don't have why not have your road go directly to Linda Vista? Then you won't be sharing this entrance road to the Linda Vista Park.
It's too steep.
Is it not possible?
So there's actually a tiny lot. I don't know how to point it to it. It's basically at a corner between the entrance and the Linda Vista Drive. There's a tiny, somewhere there. Yeah,
Yeah.
so there's a tiny lot that actually blocks the way. So we'll have to use the Linda Vista entrance.
Oh, you mean you don't own this part?
I don't know that tiny part. That's very small part. Yeah.
Someone else own that parcel.
Yeah, I don't know who owns it. Yeah.
Oh, I see. I thought. So you
Right.
own till this part?
But it's possible that once we are in, we can actually build a separate road to my property. It's possible, yeah, because that's pretty much my property. Yeah.
You can build a separate road directly from Linda Vista. So it doesn't share the very narrow entrance to Linda Vista Park.
Yeah, that's what. Yeah, that's
so that's
what I'm
possible.
Saying. Yes.
Okay.
But there has to get in the gate first because, like I said, there's a tiny lot. Yeah, over there.
Oh. Yeah, because I think many people are concerned that many people are walking to the park. If you have a lot of traffic in and out, that might make that part dangerous, right?
Right. We are actually suggesting we can build a sidewalk along the way, but separate access is another option. We can discuss with the community whichever they prefer.
Okay. Another thing is with the trail. So we were thinking, okay, we maybe rezone that part to be open space, and you are committing to maybe build a trail, but then it's going to be privately owned open space. Then it won't be open to the public to hike, right?
Oh no, there will be the trail will be open to the public.
But it's still a private land, right?
It's private land, yeah.
Okay. So and then I'm curious. So here is Linda Vista Park. Here is the golf course, Deep Cliff Golf Course. And we are just trying to reach at least this property line. So is it a possibility to have a trail along this property line of the golf course?
That part of the slope is pretty steep.
Oh, okay. That's not possible.
I don't think we can do that, at least within
because if
within
it's possible, then possibly you could did like one trail to the city, but it's not possible. Okay.
It's not possible going at north. Yeah.
Okay.
North to my property.
Okay, great. That's okay. So, do you have?
I'm not sure if I'm allowed to speak. Maybe two more minutes.
Oh, I just want something clarified by the city attorney. So tonight, do they have the right to resubmit within 30 days no matter what, or is that something that we would vote on? I'm not sure. Microphone.
Proposals not authorized by the council may be resubmitted with minor amendments within 30 days.
Right, minor
and
amendments.
such projects will be considered by the council at a future meeting.
Okay.
So I interpret that to mean that they can make minor amendments, submit within 30 days,
Right.
and the council will reconsider it.
Otherwise,
Whether
it's
it's
the next
possible to
cycle.
make minor amendments to this proposal
Yeah.
that's worth having the council reconsider at this time is probably up to the applicant to consider.
Okay.
Additionally, if it's not authorized, they can also reapply within the next year.
Within
When
the
is the
next
next
6
deadline?
months.
Cycle. Yeah.
When is the next deadline?
It's
Yeah,
actually coming up.
November 11th.
Yes.
November.
And then 6 months from that.
Yeah.
So we're looking at
May.
either the minor
May.
amendments in 30 days or
Right,
May.
I mean, the issue here is
Okay.
it took a tremendous amount of time between May and November to even get to this point. Why did it take so long, by the way?
So the first plans that were submitted, while they had the basics of what was being proposed, there were certain things that we needed additional information on to understand to even present to the council. And so we're waiting for those plans to be brought forward for us to look at and package up for the council's review.
So normally, how many months would it take?
Normally, our deadlines are May and November. May and November,
Yeah.
and the hearings are generally in August/September, and or January and February, so it just
Okay,
depends.
so we're
on-
at least like 2 months
We're
past.
about, yeah, we're
Yeah.
2 months behind, yes.
Okay.
So I guess one possible minor amendment would be, right now there are 27 units, 29, but 27 lots, I think. And
25 lots.
25 lots
23
plus the
single-family
two-
homes and 2
plus the two-
triplexes, 25.
25.
25 single-family homes and 2
But that's two
triplexes.
lots, so that's 27 lots. That's what I mean.
There are 23 single-family.
23 single-family
23.
homes.
Oh,
and two-
okay.
So it's
So 25 lots. So I'm thinking you kind of have a design, but we are looking at maybe merging 2 or 3 lots into one lot, and so maybe the change won't be that significant.
That's a big
So, so we are looking at maybe 1/3 the density, right? So you can, I think that's kind of minor, right?
No, that's
It's a
huge.
pretty big change. All the comments off the dais for the applicant are pretty major. So my guess is it's going to be a little bit,
Okay.
so all of them are pretty major, particularly combined.
Yeah, and it's also interesting that 30 days is actually longer, goes past the next cycle. So, yeah,
Well, I
it's
think
kind
it's
of
safe.
backwards.
I think it's safe to say that we're not going to authorize the GPA, and then it's up to the applicant's discretion as to whether they resubmit in 30 days or if they reapply in May. So I think that's.
Yes.
You have something to ask or
Right.
say?
Oh, did you wanna say
If
something
you have
else?
questions, you want to ask what to bring back?
Like I mentioned earlier, I'm open to ideas and the comments from the city council and also from the communities. Today I've heard a lot, and I really appreciate all those comments that makes me actually think more about this project. I'm open to ideas, either 4 lots, just for myself, or like Councilman Powell and Vice Mayor Chow mentioned, maybe we could reduce the density and, for example, maybe 9 to 10 lots with the comparable BMR lots. That's 15% of the lots. And yeah, I think I'm open to these ideas, and also I'm open to answer more questions and concerns from the council and the community. Some of the things they mentioned I didn't have a chance to explain, but maybe we can keep the communication going, and let's go from there. Thank you very much.
What you didn't get to explain?
So there are a lot of questions. For example, like I kind of touched on the 48% the slope, right? I do understand that it's a pretty strenuous slope, but we are actually using the relatively flat area, which is much beautiful. If you have hiked the area, you will know that yes, indeed there are steep slopes, but there are a lot of beautiful land.
Right, yeah, I think you already did explain that part. I mean, one thing I heard, you used a lot of phrases like, well, it seems like you could build a trail that was not too steep. But, you know, while I was sitting here, I was looking at trail steepness. 15% is actually quite a steep trail. You would rarely have a continuous 15% grade on a trail. I mean, you could have short sections that are 15%, and you do, but, you know, generally you're at 8, 9, 10%.
Yeah, but Fremont Older, where I hike, there is a section that's really steep.
Right, there are always sections. There's sections climbing Mission Peak that are steeper, but you know, yeah, generally, yeah, your trails are not that steep.
Okay. Yeah. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Okay, so
maybe just a couple more comments now.
About what?
Well, on the one hand, you know, the applicant being open to the input from the community, I think is really very important, and that he already has shown his willingness to reach out and have the meetings with the community. The point that I would want to get out. We got, you know, a large number of emails from the residents about the postcards that they didn't get, being informed about this at the relatively last minute, asking for the documents to be posted and not being posted. I honestly believe we have a duty to the residents to make sure that their needs are being met, and to the largest degree possible. Well, now it's nice that essentially everybody is up to speed and is now in the loop. I surely hope we're going to be doing a much better job in the future. You know, we're here for the residents, and they shouldn't be finding out, you know, days before or hearing it from their neighbors about something that's going to have significant potential for significant impacts to the community where they reside. And I want them to understand that I'm up here to do everything I can to make sure that happens, that they shouldn't be worried that it's going to continue, that, you know, that's the first question that I'm going to be asking, you know, is have the residents really felt like they got the information they needed in time to look at it and understand the impact and talk with city staff and make sure that the concerns they have are part of the process and not an afterthought. So please, we need to make that happen.
So, yeah, adding to that, when I met with some residents, they showed me the printout of the procedures for the GPA authorizations, and then, you know, and what wasn't followed. But then I learned, well, those procedures were written, but they're not requirements based on, I guess it was either a resolution or an ordinance that started the whole GPA authorization process in the first place. So somehow we need to align those procedures and actually follow them, even though it's not legally required to do so, or we need to make it legally required.
We're just going to change our process. That's all we're going to do.
Okay. Yeah.
One final comment regarding, thank you for making this flow chart. I think it's good that you have a GPA could be approved or not approved. I think also we should make it clear here, even after the GPA authorization has gone through, the city council could still decide they may not approve it, just so that there is no confusion here. It could still have yes or no.
Okay. So I guess we move on to the last item, which is council and staff comments and future agenda items.
Mayor, if
You
what
actually
we
need
have
to
to do?
vote. You have to
Th-
vote.
there is a
to
resolution.
authorize or
Correct.
not authorize.
Oh, okay, I thought because we're, okay.
You've provided comments over the dais, and now you need to authorize. or
Okay,
not.
okay, I'm sorry, okay. Okay, how do we do this? Darcy, you're the expert on these, so.
Well, I'll just make a
Go
motion
ahead.
that we not authorize and advise the applicant that they have the right to follow the GPA amendment process, which is either to resubmit in 30 days or to submit again in May with respect to some of the feedback and commentary from the public and the dais tonight. That's my
Sure.
motion.
All right, I'll second your motion.
Motion carries unanimously.
Okay. Now we are on to council and staff comments. Let's start with staff comments first. Do we have any?
It's late.
It's a comment.
That's never stopped anybody before. Okay, let's see. All right, I'll go. Last Sunday, the Sunday before last, I went to an interfaith service in San Francisco to commemorate the Pittsburgh synagogue shooting a year earlier. There was one state senator from San Francisco there that spoke. I also went to all the Shinchu events. I also helped out with CERT doing for the public safety power shutoff. I went door to door up around Rainbow and streets up there. Good meeting with residents. It was a little confusing to them because the PG&E website said they weren't going to be shut off, but we were passing out notices that said they were going to be shut off, and a little confusion there. I attended the VIA shuttle launch, and I attended the Santa Clara County Library Author Series and introduced the author of a book about Theranos, and I can't remember the author's name. And that's all I have. Thank you. Darcy.
League of California Cities went really well with the
forgot about
mayor
that.
and city manager and vice mayor. Learned a lot. That was my first league meeting in 5 years, and I think that we can bring a lot forward from that meeting. All sorts of people from across the state and nation that have a lot of different ideas in virtually every sector that affects us as a city. We had a poverty simulation this last Saturday, and I thought that went well. I didn't actually participate in the simulation itself, but I was there at the end during the debrief, and I know our mayor was there throughout the entire event. And I think that, it was a good way of getting a sense of, the various pressures, the specific pressures facing, the sector of the community that is severely economically disadvantaged. And I think that is basically it with regard to the non-committee assignments. I'm really glad that the VIA launch event went well, and hopefully people are using it. I'm going to be holding a town hall. That's actually technically after the next council meeting, but it's only the next day after the next council meeting, and so I'll just make a plug for that now. That's on November 20th, on Wednesday and a couple of Wednesdays. And one of the focuses I'd like to make it is the library expansion, but I'm open to other items as well, especially transit. And so perhaps part of it will be to encourage people to take the VIA shuttle over to the Civic Center to attend. All right, thanks.
Okay, so yes, I was at the launch of the city shuttle. It's been, a while in coming, and so to me that's pretty major event that it actually kicked off, and they actually pulled up with the shuttle, and then ultimately the shuttle took some residents to their destinations. So that was on Tuesday, and then there was the Chamber of Commerce lunch for legislation, and they had the 5 candidates for the state senate there, and they took answers from the audience, or questions from the audience, and allowed us to kind of get a feel for their positions. I'd like to believe it was more resident focused on what the residents of Cupertino feel are the highest priorities, like these legislative bills. I don't feel I was hearing too much of that, so it is what it is. The poverty workshop, to me, was pretty significant. I believe that I try hard to watch for the poverty that I see and look for ways that we might be able to help that. Well, attending the poverty workshop, where they essentially give you a envelope with a hypothetical family in poverty, and with a couple of the other attendees, you become a family, and you then go through the process, the weekly process, and for 4 weeks, where you're trying to make ends meet, bring in the income, and when there's just really not much money to work with, and the challenges that you're constantly faced with, transportation, the banks being closed when you get there or before you can get served and stuff. To me, it really brings home, what poverty means, that it goes way beyond just maybe not having as much as we have. It's a whole different way of living when you're going, paycheck to paycheck, if you're that lucky, because so many of the envelopes weren't even that lucky. They were out looking for jobs and things of that nature. I do want to say that the flyer for the poverty workshop, to me, just really speaks to it. It's a woman holding her young son, and, that in itself, I mean, these are people. They're people with their children, and yet they're in a predicament that in a lot of cases is really out of their control, and they can just barely get by in whatever way they can. So all that being said, I hope that we can do more as a city, we can do more as a community to help the people that are so limited in what they have. And with that, West Valley Community Services and coming and letting us know, what kind of money they need for the different things. They specifically said the last time they didn't ask for money. I was kind of surprised because I asked them after the last budget, why weren't you there asking for money? And they said, because we deliberately wanted that money to go to the other agency because they needed it rather than them. And so I told Josh, I said, Josh, in the future, yeah, you can do that, but please let us know what you feel you need for your help to these people also. And let us try to get what you and the other groups need and not going without. And so I'd like to kind of alert the fellow council here that hopefully we can be generous with our budgeting process, in the future. So
I think that poverty workshop was great. I think it would be even better if they could kind of redo it more to be like what the situation here is in Silicon Valley. I think it was designed for Iowa or Missouri.
Yeah, Missouri, I think.
And it's not
years
just
ago.
the difference in wages and housing costs. There's other issues as well. And so that might be an interesting thing. If Josh is interested, we can even find a community group to, even
Work
our
with
housing
it,
commission
yeah.
maybe could work on that. Okay, Leon.
So on October 16 to 18, I also went to the League of California Cities, the annual meeting for the first time. I have to say this meeting is not as informative as the January meeting for new council member because they did not even give us legislative updates. In January, they had the lobbyists for each of the 7 committees to give us updates on what they are doing. And I thought October is an ideal time for them to give us that updates. They didn't. I find a lot more interesting topics in the city attorney's session because they talk about the new bills for home kitchen.
Considering it's 1:37, could we keep
Okay.
this really brief?
Okay. So on the 24th, I went to a group called Code for San Jose. It's a bunch of volunteer programmers. They are writing code for the city of San Jose on various projects, census or bike path projects. And on the 28th, I went to another meeting on Census 2020. On the 1st of November, I also went to the Senate Candidates Forum hosted by Chamber. All 5 candidates were there. And I attended the Shinjuku City events. And on the 2nd of November, I attended a very interesting meeting. It's a quite same theme Chrysanthemum Society, Bay Area Chrysanthemum Society floral show. So they are asking whether they thank us for our funding of $1,300 for their event, but then they are trying to preserve a lot of actually endangered species here. And then I didn't go to the poverty simulation this time but I did go to one. I went to one 2 or 3 years ago in a church, and that one actually allowed children to participate. I think this one we are requiring people to be 18 or older. So I hope the next one we would allow children. And also at that time we also couldn't reach the bank in time to cash our check, and we have to be hungry. So they really need to update that, because I don't know how many people have to face that nowadays. Yeah, with the automatic deposit. Okay.
Hey, Rod.
Yeah, I've been out of town some. I've run one. I organized one poverty simulation and went to another one. So I'm really glad that people have a chance to experience the real issues, which are, it all comes back down to housing and transportation and the amount of time it takes to get around our region, especially if you're dependent on transit. It's from this place to the airport in the middle of the day is still 1 hour and 22 minutes. It's a disaster, and if you just think about what a handicap that is. That was the thing that was most striking to me when I did it the first time. I have a couple of things for our council to consider, I think, before the end of the year. One is, I'll preface it by saying that there's a letter that's just out today from 22 mayors and a whole variety of supervisors, I think maybe from 6 different counties in PG&E's territory, asking the California Public Utilities Commission to consider turning PG&E into a public agency, and I think we ought to. I think we ought to think about weighing in on this also. It's a group that includes the likes of Berkeley and Oakland and Sunnyvale and so forth. And I think if we brought this to the next council meeting, we could weigh in at a timely way. And I think it's worth thinking about. For me, the fact that PG&E charges 30 to 50% more than municipal utilities in the state is a big factor, and also the fact that we do need some resilient solutions. So I think going in with these other local governments, or at least considering that, is something I would like to see on the agenda. The second one is considering, for now, weighing in on the principles of how, if there were a region-wide measure on transportation, what we think is important. I'm in receipt of a letter that I'll pass on through our city manager on how supervisors and many city officials in Alameda County are thinking about faster. And frankly, with a very diplomatic letter, they're basically questioning public's appetite for a 1% sales tax increase and suggesting maybe there are some other ways to do this. So I'll pass that on through the city manager and see if we might want to talk about the principles under which we, might be interested in participating or not.
Right. I mean, I'd be willing to agendize that, for
sure. Darcy and I are there's another meeting this week where we're going to be talking with electeds in the North County and West Valley about this particular subject, and it'll come up. I know the Alameda letter will come up there as well. So those are my two requests to put in the hopper to take, potentially to take some positions on after our discussion. Thank you.
Okay, anyone else have anything to add? Okay. What time is it? Oh, it's not even 2 yet. Okay. Thank you. Let's go to the bar.